Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to the education meeting. Just to let you know what we've already accomplished, we have opened the meeting in our public session and called to order by Chair Hickison. She's taken attendance and we approved an agenda, and there aren't any changes to the agenda that was published. We've convened into private session, come out of private session, and now we're reconvening into the education committee meeting. So I'd like to call the meeting to order at this point. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement since we weren't live streaming previously. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. As I mentioned, we have taken attendance. We're all in attendance with the exception of Trustee Amy Olmsted. She has given regrets for the early part of the meeting. She is going to try to attend as quickly and as soon as she can. My name's Julia Burgess, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Education Committee, and therefore I'm standing in for the Chair of the Committee, Amy Olmsted. I'd like to say at this point what our theme is for this committee for the year. We haven't met since November, and our theme for the year for the Education Committee for 2021 is a fairly comprehensive one. It's diversity, wellness, resiliency, and learning in action. And hopefully through this committee, with our discussions and our presentations, we'll see some real great things and some progress in diversity, wellness, resiliency, and learning in action. So we're at our agenda now, item C, the approval of the agenda, and we have a draft agenda before us. If trustees could please note, there is an addition to our agenda at G3. That's under presentations. We presently have two on the printed agenda. There is an addition. G3 will be a glimpse of learning in the virtual school. It'll be a 3-minute video and presentation by Superintendent Clara Howitt. And so with that addition to the draft agenda, I see that we have a motion by Trustee Hatfield, supported by Trustee Cook, to move that agenda. Are there any additional changes, comments, anything you want to do with the agenda? I'm not hearing any amendments, further amendments, so I will ask, is there any opposition to adopting this agenda with the addition of G3? I see support and I don't hear any objections, so we will adopt and approve the agenda with that G3 addition. We're now at item D, the declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for anything on our agenda? I know that some of you are muted. I'm going to take a second just in case. Okay. I don't hear any objections, any declarations rather, to any conflicts of interest. So I see that Trustee Sartori and would like to move the approval of the minutes, item E, that's where we're at now. Approval of the minutes for the Education Committee minutes from the 3rd of November. And that is supported by Trustee Chin. Are there any corrections, amendments, additions, anything to the minutes?
I have a question, Trustee.
Trustee Halberstadt, you have a question on the minutes?
It's on page 3 of the minutes. Right there, the bottom, it's Trustee Higginson. Got a consensus around the room to send a letter to the Ministry of Education to cover funding for students over 34 credits. I know we sent that letter out. I wonder if we'd had any response at all from the ministry with regard to actually putting that into effect, or just thanks, but no thanks.
Okay, I'm going to put that at item F, questions arising from the minutes. Right now, we're just looking at the approval of the minutes. I don't think the minutes are incorrect in capturing that comment from Trustee Higginson. So are there any questions right now or corrections to the minutes before we adopt them? Anything? Okay, if I don't hear any objections, I'm going to declare that the minutes have been approved by consensus. We're at item F, and Trustee Halberstadt, you've raised a question that is arising from the minutes on, I don't have a handwritten, but I have page 3 or 4 of the minutes at the bottom. Correct. You'd like an update. You'd like an update on that. Would you like to restate it, or can we have somebody answer?
Yes, there was a consensus that night to send a letter to the ministry with regard to cover funding for students over 34 credits. And I know the letter went out. I'm not quite sure exactly when, but I'm just wondering if we've heard any response from the ministry with regard to perhaps they would do that, or just no response at all, or note and file.
Who would like to broach that question?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's Director Kelly. I don't believe we received any response to that letter.
Okay, Director Kelly, when was that sent out exactly?
I'd have to look back on the date that was sent, but it was sent quite a while ago, as I recall, because I know Superintendent Howitt and I both had input into that letter. Unless you remember, Superintendent Howitt, I don't have an exact date.
I saw it in the last board package. I think it was in December.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would be productive to send the minister a subtle reminder that the letter went out, and wondered if he could respond.
What say you, trustees? An additional letter or a question? If I could, I will also add that in our discussions at Policy Development Work Team, OPSPA Committee, and through OPSPA GSN, the Grants for Student Needs consultation from OPSPA, you will notice that our provincial organization, our region, and we brought forward this very concern. So it was captured in the provincial asks for recognition to fully fund, in other words, the Victory Lap, the additional instruction that students might need, for to upgrade, some of their things that they're experiencing through this pandemic time. So, do I hear anything about sending something additional to that?
Well, I would just move, maybe by consensus, that we send a reminder letter. It only has to be a couple paragraphs, and see if it bears any results.
Okay, so if there's unanimous consent, we can do that. If I hear any objections, please state that or put it in the chat. For those who are watching, we have a little sidebar that we can put some additional comments in chat that I'm monitoring. So is there consent to do that? Is there any objection? I don't hear any, so I would think that administration, if you could follow up on that and just do a brief second request.
Sure, it's the director, and I would just add through you, Madam Chair, that this is certainly something that directors of education advocate for as well, because we are concerned about ensuring that all students have the necessary program needs and the opportunities that they deserve.
Yeah, and are you doing that, if I could ask, are you doing that through CODE, the Council of Directors of Education, formally, so that we have a few organizations asking?
Yeah, I believe we are. I can check on that specifically, but I certainly know that in our regular meetings with the ministry, with the deputy, that certainly has been a point of discussion.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Is there any other business arising from these minutes? Time to unmute, etc. Nope. Okay. We're all moving on to presentations. As I noted, we have 3 this evening. We're going to start with G1, the FNMI update, which is First Nations, Métis, Inuit update. And Superintendent Howitt is going to be introducing herself and some staff members, and we look forward to that update. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here this evening to provide an update on First Nations programming and support in the district. The focus of the presentation, I'll just ask that this slide be advanced. The focus of the presentation this evening is on how do we support Indigenous students specifically, how do we engage the community, and how do we support learning for all students and staff within the community. And I'm very pleased this evening to have several members of the Open Minds team with me, Tina DeCastro, Brianne John, Tyler White, and Adrian Klein. And I'm gonna ask that they just put on their cameras and introduce themselves so that you can see them. And then we're gonna get started with the presentation, starting with Tina, then Brianne, Tyler, and Adrian.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tina DeCastro, and I'm the teacher consultant that is fortunate enough to work with the wonderful 3 people who are about to introduce themselves to you. The Ministry of Education also places a different title on my position. They use the title of Indigenous Education Lead, and the team knows I'm not very comfortable with that title, because I don't think leadership exists in titles. I think leadership exists in the actions that we do that make a difference every day. And I just want to say that as you listen to this presentation, you're going to hear the actions that each of these members take that I truly believe make a difference in the lives of the students and the families and the staff that we support. So thank you so much for listening and for having us tonight.
Segwali Sokweg, Galiwalalax, Nyungyat, Segwali, Nugitaloda, Onyata Agar, Nuguhanjod. My name is Brianne John. I have been in the role of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit student support worker this is my 4th year now. And I also hold the position of cultural and community outreach, so providing system support and collaborating with community agencies to provide supports for our students.
Good evening, White. I am also one of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit student support workers for the school board. I wanted to say Buju and Segoli to everybody, and thank you very much for having me this evening.
Adrian, if you could introduce yourself.
Bonjour, Seguli. Greetings. My name is Adrian Klein. I am the 3rd First Nations Métis Inuit student support worker. I'm in my 1st year in this position, and I'm happy to be a part of our great team.
Thank you to the group this evening for joining me in this presentation, and more importantly for the work that you do every day to support students and families within the district. So if you could advance the slide, please, actually to the next 2 slides. We're going to start off by talking about how we provide a direct support to Indigenous students. So the FMNI support workers work directly with students that are self-identified as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and their respective families, as well as the school staff, in terms of matters related to achievement, cultural inclusiveness, and building trusting relationships. And it all comes down to building trusting relationships. We really do try to provide accessibility, equity, and accessibility to the support of these 3 workers. And based on the data, we determine where the workers are on a weekly basis, where they are on a monthly basis, and where they are on an as requested basis. So if they are at a school, they are connected to schools on a weekly basis, they visit that school at least once a week, if not more, and they're part of the regular school schedule for support. In these schools, they offer in-class academic support, programming before and after school, during nutrition breaks, and after school, and that's all based on the voices of the students within the school, what they need, they're responsive to that. They do that as well with their monthly visits to schools, and as requested, if needed in any school, we're pleased to provide support. So the student workers this year, it looks a little bit differently in that they connected with the classroom teachers in virtual Microsoft Team meetings to provide that academic, cultural, and well-being support to the teachers. They also act as a liaison between the student, the family, and the school, and in many cases, community organizations. And then they also collaborate with staff to enhance inclusive learning environments where they're assisting teachers in understanding Indigenous cultural learning principles to really ensure cultural safety for Indigenous students and for all students. And they meet with staff on an ongoing basis to develop and monitor learning profiles of the students, which this team meets on regularly, and they consider the intellectual, spiritual, physical, and emotional social well-being of those students, and planning for students in the secondary panel and transitioning to post-secondary opportunities. I'm going to pass it on to Brianne to talk a little bit about the support workers and virtual programming.
Yeah, so this year we wanted to do as much as we could that we would have in person, but try and pivot it virtually. And as much as that's come with challenges, it's also come with a lot of opportunities to provide things that we might not have been able to before. So we're still working hard to make sure that we're providing programming and events. And again, like Clara said, it's always based on student and family voices. So we recognize that families really don't want to be on computers longer than they have to. So any programming that we're offering, it really has to be what they want. And so some of the things that we've offered, there's a few flyers here, like paint nights. They were really engaging prior to the pandemic. So we knew it would be something that families would still want now. Workshops that each of us have provided for our own individual schools based on our caseloads. That before and after school programming, as well as during those nutrition breaks, are based on student voice, and then cultural learning opportunities. Not just, I think one thing that was big with this is families being at home. Sometimes it's hard to do targeted ages, so we're trying to do things that really engage the entire family, so there's not as much of a concern that some of the children at home couldn't participate in something.
So the transitions to the early years virtual visits. So each year we, the Open Minds team, we do our best to try to make sure students have smooth and successful transitions. In order to ensure students know that they have our support, we try to connect with the early year students who identify as being Indigenous at the beginning of each school year. Considering this year, we've been still visiting those new learners, but we've been doing that virtually. So we've been scheduling virtual classrooms visit to share this book that my heart fills with happiness. And even though that this year looks a little different, we're still able to connect with our new students in a good way.
One of the other things that we do each year is we welcome students to grade 9. Usually what we do is we would actually provide a gift and maybe I think the last year was a gift card, and something that they could use to help them get settled into grade 9. So what we did was usually we go to schools and we visit each grade 9 student that is in our respective schools that we're aligned to, and we say hello, introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about what the Open Minds program has to offer, and then just a general welcoming with some gifts and some things that they can help utilize for transitioning into grade 9. Obviously, this year it looked a little different. We had the 2 different cohorts, the in-school and then the online. So the ones were sent to the schools themselves, and then handed out, and then the online ones, they were sent to their homes, and then we kind of followed up with a message on Teams or on EDSB, just different ways that we could connect. This year was a little unique, so we were able to give them hand sanitizer, a mask, a Staples gift card, a reusable water bottle, and that was actually thanks to one of our parents helped with a Tupperware that she runs to help give those water bottles out to the students. And then, of course, our contact information. Again, it was a little different this year, so we set them with a little card. Obviously, we do this to show that we're there to support them, just to kind of break the ice as well, and to show them that, you know, that if there's anything that they need, that they can get a hold of us. And so we weren't able. It was a little difficult in this time that we weren't able to connect with them personally as well, but we did try our best to let them know that we are still here and available to help them in any way that we can.
So obviously a big transition for high school students is the transition from grade 12 to whatever next step that is. And so in previous years, we've worked with post-secondary institutions, especially University of Windsor, to try and just show as many pathways as possible for those grade 12 students. So one thing that we have done this year as well, and we did last year, was with Sean Hugterp from Lambton College. He ran a college application workshop. So for students specifically interested in college, he walked them through the process, and then Lambton offered to pay their OCAS fee of $95. So just trying to reduce some barriers for those students to get into college and start exploring those pathways. In terms of University of Windsor, because it is our closest university, we try and, again, in previous years, get students used to campus life and get familiar and comfortable and understand that all the supports that exist within our board exist at the university and at the college as well. And so our role is really to connect the students to those supports so that it's kind of an easy transition there. So this year, with everything being virtual, we were still trying to think of creative ways to do that. And one way was through a partnership with the HK Students Association and Lancers Recreation to host kind of a challenge. And our idea was also, because we know students are sitting in front of computers all day, they might not be moving as much. And so we wanted to encourage some healthy habits along the way. And the university has been so generous with the programming that they've been offering and providing a lot of funds for prizes and all of that stuff. So really it made our role pretty easy in that we were just advertising and encouraging our students to participate in that. And so they will be offering it again in the spring once the weather gets a bit warmer and it's a bit nicer to be walking outside again. So that was one way. And again, in the past, we'd have March break, we'd have PD days, we'd have opportunities for students to be on campus. So because we haven't been able to do that this year, the university offered through Turtle Island Aboriginal Student Center, they offered to put together kind of like gift bags that had promotional materials from the University of Windsor, as well as, again, some contact information and some outreach for any grade 11 and 12 Indigenous students. And they're also looking at possibly offering that for grade 9s and 10s as well, it just kind of depending on their budget. But so we're still working in collaboration with them to make sure that our students feel that connection to that campus, if that's an option that they'd like to pursue.
So you noticed that Brianne brought up a partnership with the University of Windsor and even different departments within the University of Windsor. So I'd like to start off with saying how important I really feel that partnerships are in the work that we do. And the collaborations that we form are so essential, because it is as a result of those partnerships and collaborations that we're able to provide the opportunities that we do in the way that we do. And I'm really happy to introduce a new partnership that we just formed this year, which is with Future Design School. And this course that I'm going to speak briefly about to you actually came out of a discussion that we were having. And I feel partnerships are successful when we're at the table with the same goal in mind. And Future Designs and the people that work for that organization, their main goal is how do we elevate and provide opportunities for Indigenous students to be successful? And that's our goal, right? That's what we always strive for. So this is really an amazing opportunity that I can't wait to see it into fruition. It's a co-op course. It's a new entrepreneurship co-op course that is designed to empower Indigenous students with the skills and the competencies that they need to be successful in the future, regardless of whether they go to post-secondary school, whether they go directly into the workforce. It's really about using their own passions and gifts, and in terms of looking at project management as a way to identify the challenges as well as the opportunities that exist within their community, and to identify a plan of action, to take action and design their own plan of action on addressing an issue in their community that's meaningful to them and that they're passionate about. So we're really excited because we think that it's really going to help them to increase their ability to be creative problem solvers, to collaborate, and teaches them really important skills for their future. As you know, it's really important that we get enrollment, right, in order for courses to run. So so grateful for the partnership with Student Success, that we're working together to really look at ways in which how can we get students excited and enrolled in this course. So on March 31st, we're going to host a virtual live session, information session that's really going to help to answer any questions that students and families may have about this course, and to really help them to understand how wonderful this opportunity will be for them. So that, again, that's happening on March 31st. So really, really looking forward to this opportunity in September. So some additional educational or academic supports that we provide students. So fortunate, I think it's now 5 years that our Making Connections tutoring program has been running. Currently, we have 23 elementary students and 4 secondary students who are receiving one-on-one tutoring support specific to their needs. And again, it's so wonderful that the University of Windsor always steps up when we don't have enough tutors. Their Faculty of Education always has students who are willing to volunteer their time until we're able to ensure that there are tutors that can be aligned to each student, and really appreciate the opportunity to work with them as well and to help build capacity for them in this program. Another opportunity that we've provided this year because of a partnership is the Anishinaabe or the Ojibwe language course, level 1. This is with the Dufferin Catholic District School Board. The ideal is that we offer this and we provide this opportunity in our own school board. But right now the challenge is getting enough students to enroll to be able to afford. The model that they have is just, it's amazing. They have 2 language speakers and a qualified secondary teacher running the course in collaboration. And even though it's virtual, they engage in experiential learning opportunities as well through the virtual format, which is just like amazing to watch happen. And the feedback that we're receiving, not only from the student attending the course, but from the family that watches in while the class is happening, is just been so positive. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully learn from that model and look at ways that we can bring that model into our own board. Another thing that we're going to be doing in May, in collaboration, I'm so fortunate to sit on the First Nations Métis and Inuit Education Association Organization Council. And because of that, we're able to provide different opportunities for students and teachers. And one of the opportunities that we're planning at the moment is an Indigenous Student Science and Math Symposium, which is pretty exciting. Camp Magazine is such a wonderful, successful program. Again, I think it's 7 years, might be 7 years that we'll be running the program. Last year it was virtual, and it was amazing to be able to reach the students who may not have physically been present because of location, geographical barriers, were able to join in virtually with us. So that was so great to have returning students, but also be able to reach out to new students. And an exciting new opportunity that we have for support is the 2 academic support teachers that were just hired. This program, we have really worked at it being very strategic to meet the needs of each learning model. So the support is going to look very different based on the learning model that the student is engaged in. So for correspondence, and calls are being made as we speak, like today calls were made, and families were so appreciative of the opportunity in correspondence to have their students. So what's happening is the academic support teacher is going to be providing virtual assessments to gain a deeper understanding of how the student is doing in terms of mathematical and literacy skills. So we're going to be doing some diagnostic assessments that the information will then be shared with the parents. The information will be shared with the current correspondence teacher, as well as hopefully with them to the teacher who, teaches them next year in September. And that will be really valuable information, because it is one of the challenges right now with these models of learning, especially correspondence, is to get specific, concrete diagnostic assessment that can be used for students. So that's for correspondence. For virtual, what we're doing is first, we're going to seek to understand the challenges and the barriers, as well as the opportunities that the students are facing in this model of learning. We're going to be engaging in a listening stage, a listening exercise, where we're going to be asking the parents to, again, this is completely optional. If the parents don't feel comfortable with engaging in this activity, they don't need to, but it's really for us to get a deeper understanding of how we can better support and decide what are those support's going to entail. Is this going to be something that the academic support teacher needs to follow through with and provide virtual small group instruction in literacy and numeracy? Or is it going to be support that the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit support workers provide? Or is it a tutor that we need to align to them? Or is this something else that we need to? This again, so that's the approach that we're taking with the virtual students. And the students who are in person are going to actually receive, again, the diagnostic assessments will be done, and they will, and this unfortunately can't be every in-person. We only have 2 academic support teachers, but there will be schools selected for the academic teachers to work in. We'll be using a variety of data to make that determination so that it is the best use of their time to be in those schools. And that support will include the assessments as well as sessions, one-on-one and group, small group intervention sessions that will focus on the level literacy instruction, as well as using leaps and bounds remediation in order to really target the specific needs of those students. And that will be done, we're hoping, face-to-face 2 times to 3 times a week. So with that being said, they're not going to be in that many schools, maybe 2 or 3 at the most, to provide that in-person support. But we really didn't want it to just be for the in-person support. We wanted to make sure that we're also reaching out to the correspondents as well as the virtual students with that program. So another really important part of our program is community engagement. And again, I can't stress how important those collaborations and partnerships are. And because none of this would be possible if we didn't work together, right? And came to the table recognizing that we all have gifts to bring and strengths, but we also have areas of need that each partner can help fulfill. So we're still, and when I say partner, I'm also talking about amazing community people. For example, Adrian brought in people into the virtual powwow fitness sessions, community members that are coming in and who really just want to share and provide opportunities for families in our district, which is just wonderful. And our upcoming social series is going to continue. We have an excellent storytelling series. Oh, that was just had the kids in stitches. We had our first one last week, and the kids were just laughing at the stories that Isaac shared with them. Just want to share with you as well that all of this information that we're sharing with you is on our board website under programs and specifically Indigenous education. So you can see more information about that there on our board website. Clara, did you want to talk about our IAC meetings?
Sure. Thanks, Tina. I remember when we first started IAC meetings, before IAC meetings were guided in terms of ministry direction, and they started when we consulted on the self-ID policy. We had multiple meetings at Begley Public School and at various locations throughout the community. So the Greater Essex was hosting Indigenous education advisory meetings before it was chic and popular, if you will. And I'm really glad to say now, years later, as we launched our IEAC meetings this week, we have many people coming to the table of parents and guardians, representative of the students that we serve in the system. And at our last meeting, we had many staff there. We had about 7 or 8 staff. So we had about 16 different family members around the table. So it was really a robust meeting where people really care and share their ideas and help guide us in the very important work that we're doing. As well, we offer newsletters, and I'm going to pass that on to Tina to speak about the newsletters.
Yeah, and I think it's just so important that that we share with you that many of the most actually of the items that we put into action are because of the voices at those tables telling us what's important to them. Because it's essential that we listen to those voices, right? And one of the things that was constantly being shared with us is families were sharing that they didn't know what was happening, that things were happening and they weren't aware of it. And because of that, we decided to start a newsletter to really inform, but also to celebrate all the wonderful successes that are happening throughout the system in terms of Indigenous education. So the newsletter serves many purposes, right? It serves that purpose to help parents feel connected to what's happening, to be aware, to be transparent about what's happening in our system. And it's really important that we also share all the successes, right? Not just update, but also celebrate the successes that are happening. One of the things that we also started because of parent feedback was an Open Minds Facebook page. And it was evident that if we wanted to reach parents, that was one of the best ways to reach them. And so it's a great place. Again, we put updates about what's happening, not just in our program, but what's being offered in other programs at Greater Essex County District School Board. So it's just a place where we, again, another way in which we can reach more families, and hopefully encourage them to continue to engage with us in any way that they can throughout the year. So again, if you go to the board website under programs in Indigenous education, you will see copies of each of these in the Open Mind section. So another very important part of our program is supporting Indigenous education in the classroom with all students and staff. And there are different things that we've done. Everybody knows I could go on forever and ever. Wish I had much more time to go into detail about each of the things that we do. But this is, again, I'm confident that these PowerPoint will be shared with you, so you will be able to look at this in greater detail with more time and explore it further if you'd like. But it's just really important that you be aware that we're also, dedicated to supporting Indigenous education in the classroom. And one of the ways that I like to communicate to teachers is using SWAY. And the reason I do that is because people often will say that there's not enough resources. In fact, there is an overwhelming amount of resources. They're just not always the most appropriate or effective resources. So I use SWAY as a way to collect resources, to put all the resources together so teachers don't have to go searching all over the place to find them. And what you'll find also is included is a set of guidelines to help guide them on how best to approach the topic of the SWAY that's created. And there's a link there, but again, you can access these on our board website under Indigenous Education and Teacher and Learning. One of my favorite activities that we did this year, and what's really important to mention too, is that the challenges that this pandemic has brought to us has also forced us to kind of open our minds and to think of redefining the way that we do things, and redefining, for example, professional development. And so many of the sessions that we've provided is really about going into the classroom, and they're provided for students. But when students are engaged in this learning, the teachers are engaged as well, right? It's usually, we consider professional learning taking the teacher out of the classroom, but this really forced us to really think back to that idea of bringing that professional learning back right into the classroom at the desk of the student. And the Treaty Recognition Week was just one of my favorite ones that we engaged in, which was an inquiry. We had an artist work with this, artist Moses Lunham, and the picture that the students painted was picked purposefully aligned to the curriculum expectations of that grade level. And the students then went on an inquiry asking questions about what each thing was, why certain symbols were picked in the painting. And then they had opportunities to come into team meetings and ask different knowledge keepers their questions and get the answers to those questions. So it was just a great learning opportunity for everyone involved. And there were several others around teaching and learning sessions as well offered. This is just other examples of learning that has happened. The Caldwell Nation Project is actually a project that's happening at the moment. And it was inspired by an awareness that was brought to us about misrepresentation of local Indigenous people. And they had a totem pole, and we had a great discussion around how do we respectfully remove the totem pole, but at the same time help students to see an alternative way of looking at the way that we represent and honor and respect the people, the original people. And what better way than to reach out to the Caldwell First Nation? And so they're working in collaboration with Harrow as well to, in the end, create a new representation that really symbolizes not only Caldwell First Nations, but the learning that the students did throughout the process. And we're continuing to do that as well with different schools. And it looks different for each school because the context and the history is different of each item in the school. Just other different, these were actual professional learning opportunities that were offered after school that teachers participated in. And what I do again is I create a sway of the entire presentations so teachers can go back and do the learning again or share the learning with others. So these were just, and the support workers also provided specific sessions that were geared towards how do we support Indigenous students and how do we understand intergenerational trauma. We're continuing with the implementation of NBE, continuing to support teachers teaching the NBE course, which is the grade 11 Indigenous literature course. And those are sessions that have occurred, and there's so many more that are coming. These are just a few of the upcoming learning sessions, but what I wanted to point out here is that the sessions are planned based on feedback from students, from Indigenous parents, as well as from teachers. And one of the items that kept surfacing was the concept of terminology and how do we use terminology. So that's going to be one of the sessions that's going to be offered in February, is going to be helping staff to really understand how to use the terminology appropriately and how terminology is so connected to the concept of identity. So that's going to be one of the sessions. Another exciting opportunity for students and teacher learning is going to be working in collaboration with artist Isaac Murdoch in really helping teachers for students to understand and teachers to understand how we can use art as a way to move to social action. Another great partnership and collaboration, again with FNMI EAO, is it's a pilot project, and it's really to help other teachers in the future understand how to use this resource that was created. It's called Lessons from Beyond. And this partnership is going to allow the teachers who are involved to have someone from NASA as well as an Indigenous scientist come into the classroom and use the resource with their students. So unfortunately, historically, Indigenous knowledge systems have not been valued in the same way as they should be. And so this is an exciting opportunity to start bringing the value to those knowledge systems into the classroom, and to help teachers and students see how those knowledge systems, how we can learn from them and how they have existed for years, right? And how we can use them today. So I'm going to pass it on to Clara now to share some of the educational resources that we've been working on. And
thanks, Tina. As Tina said, we're a district that has many rich resources available to our students and staff, and we're continuously always considering how we can improve on those resources. We as a team engage in learning with others across the province, and in the fall we attended an Indigenous lead meeting virtually, and we were able to hear what other people are doing, other districts are doing. And one of the presentations intrigued us from the Upper Canada Board, and they engaged in a library gap analysis. And so we too have launched in that project, and I look forward to bringing a more detailed information to the Board of Trustees in a future presentation. But essentially this project is focused on determining equity in the resources purchased and access to those resources across the system. So we want to make sure all our schools have the most appropriate, most contemporary representative resources for our staff and students to use. And in this process, it also achieves the opportunity to help build capacity in our educators in selecting and deselecting resources and those reasons for selection and deselection. Additionally, we offer subscriptions like to FMNI IEAO, which provides teachers access to virtual classroom resources. This year, we provided the Nelson Grade 10 Enhancement Resource to all Canadian and World Studies department heads. Was really happy this year to provide enhancement resources in terms of the Nelson Social Studies resource. I know that social studies resources, I know that was really well received in the system, as well as the Take Action for Reconciliation. It's like a 4-magazine style book focusing on Indigenous communities across Canada and the importance of a need for reconciliation. And then we also offered a 4-series hardcover Indigenous Atlas for Canada for each one of our libraries. So again, we are continuously investing in the resources that are representative of the contemporary Indigenous representation across Canada. And with that, we would be pleased to answer any questions from the Board of Trustees.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. There's just so much there to unpack. I do note that we have a question from Trustee Higginson. I do have to ask also if Trustee Halberstadt, you had your hand up. I don't know if that was kind of a leftover hand or a new question, but I will go to Trustee Higginson for your question.
Thank you. I do have 2 questions, so I'll go to the end of the queue for my second one. But my first one, and you touched on it a little bit, but I wonder if you could either clarify for me or talk about some of the other ways that, and it's in reference to the kind of the Open Minds Facebook page in particular. And I wondered, while we're so kind of isolated and removed, how we are, and it may be through that Open Minds Facebook page is the kind of best way that you're finding. How do families connect with each other and students connect with each other in these kind of liminal informal spaces? And how are we encouraging those sorts of connections to happen to kind of like bring meaning to the learning that they're having and open up some lines of communication between each other?
Thank you. I'll start off with that, and Tina or any other member of the group, if you would like to add to my response, but there's multiple ways, and it has been extremely challenging this year, a year like no other. But one of the ways is the support workers do meet in small groups with students, not only within their school proper, but across schools, so that they're connecting with peers within and their school and across the system. I also know through the family engagement evenings and opportunities, and as Brianne said, the activities that have been developed have been ones to unite the family, but in those sessions, they're virtual and multiple families are together, as well as the Facebook page. But I defer to Tina as well to add to that response.
I think that the support workers would agree that those opportunities, that programming that they provide, that's exactly what it serves. It serves as an opportunity for families to come together. Like and sometimes it's interactive, right? And so I think that that's an excellent question. IAC is also an opportunity for that, right? Like having families come together and discuss our board action plan and give us feedback on what's happening. But it makes me wonder, your question makes me think about, are we asking ourselves that question when we're planning these opportunities? Are we asking, how can we engage families with each other during these opportunities, right? Like, because we can either create that opportunity or we can shut it down. For example, for the storytelling, it's then linked to YouTube, right? So families can interact. So by doing that, we're including more families, but we're not giving them an opportunity to interact. So your question makes me think that as a team, we can go back and reflect on what are ways that we can have families during these sessions interact with each other. And I see that Tyler has his hand up, so he may have the answer to that question.
I was just going to build on that, I believe, and kind of give an example of what the support workers do. And then just kind of give a personal example that I have. Every Wednesday, I usually hold a little get together for students virtually during their online time, to come together, and I've shared a couple stories that I've been told, from an Ojibwe and Haudenosaunee perspective, that I've been able to share with them, and that I felt confident that I've been able to share with them, and I've learned growing up. And it was more of a wellness piece. Like, we talked about what the meaning of the story was, what the importance of the story was, and how to build off of those situations, and kind of apply them to what they're experiencing now in school, and a couple of other personal life that they're in right now, because it's so different. So this is for the elementary students, and I think what was really nice is I had one student chime in and say, "Can I tell a story?" And so he ended up telling my group, and usually we go from I vary from 10 to 15 students each week. He's in grade 5, and he told the story that he was told by his grandparents. And I thought that was the coolest thing. He built up the courage, that interaction. So it wasn't just me telling the story. It became another student telling the story to other students, and they loved the story, and we talked about it and the importance of it. And luckily enough, I knew the story as well, so we were kind of able to build off of it as well. And so I just kind of give you a little example of how those little the unique situations that we're in, because it's from all my different schools that I'm aligned with that they're coming into. It would be a little bit different if they're unable to join together like that when they're different schools. So it was a nice opportunity, and I just thought I'd like to share. Thank you.
Some great answers there to that very good and provocative question. Alicia, Trustee Hickison, I don't see any other question in the queue. If you'd like to ask your second question, that would be great.
I do see Trustee Halberstad's hand up, but I'm not sure if it's a remnant hand or if he...
I will ask right now. I did ask before. Is that a new question, Trustee Halberstad?
Yes, that's an active hand.
Oh, good. Please, Trustee Halberstad.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm just a sort of a newcomer to this Indigenous Committee, and I've really been blown away by the things that it offers. I remember getting back on the board 6 years ago, and I had some complaints from constituents about what is the board doing with the money they're getting from the government to enhance Indigenous presence in the community. And so it's really limitless, as we see tonight. And I guess there's an official plan. There's a plan coming up next week. There's a meeting next week, and maybe Clara can touch on that. But the question I do have, specific question I do have is, do we have a firm number of how many Indigenous students we have in our system?
So thank you for the question. First, let me speak to your noting our sharing of information in the IEAC meeting in November. We presented a tentative plan to our parents and guardians, and just a couple of weeks ago, we presented a more detailed plan and talking about how things are sourced in terms of funding directed to Indigenous education and the additional dollars that this board dedicates to supporting Indigenous education, direct support to students, and building capacity amongst all, which is our mandate through our Indigenous education protocol and through the mandate through the Ministry of Education. And you are correct, we have a meeting on Monday to share specifically the BAP, the Board Aboriginal Plan, in detail once again with the community before we send it off to the ministry. In terms of the number, I don't have the exact number, and I'm going to refer to Tina again. She might have the most exact number for elementary and secondary students that have self-identified, but I will say that we do have more students that have not yet identified. Each year we continuously grow that number. But Tina, can you provide us with the exact number? And if not, I can certainly provide that to the Board of Trustees. I will find that information and provide it to you.
So it is constantly changing. Just want to say that this may in a month not be the numbers. But currently we have 483 elementary students who have self-identified as either First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, and we have 201 secondary students.
And I guess we're trying to find more, right, who would self-identify. That's an ongoing exercise.
That's a process of building trust with our community. My recollection of the last number we had was about 600, so clearly we're above that right now. Again, it's through the process of building relationships with families, and it's a choice on their part if they self-identify. It's also of benefit to the board in terms of self-ID'd students do help to generate additional dollars. So the more that we're demonstrating our continuous and genuine effort to that dedication, I think the more we build commitment and trust amongst the community.
Thank you for that. Trustee Higgison, would you like to have your question, please?
I would. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Through you to whoever can answer this, there was a mention in the presentation about resource gaps in libraries, and it sparked in me, I recall, I believe it was student trustee Unger, who had asked, I think at the end of last year, about representation in our curriculum and in our resources. So I don't know if those are connected. The looking at gaps in our library resources and looking at gaps in our curriculum resources and seeing how we can be more authentically representative in there in our classroom curriculum resources, and whether that is in scope or out of scope for that project.
Thank you for the question. I do recall what our student trustees brought forward, and in fact, there has been action done based on their recommendations, and through their liaise with the board, Michelle Marcoux, the board of, the student senate, shared with us their selection of resources that they felt were representative of the students that we serve in their system. We have consulted with that list, and we have done a purchase. It's been made. We haven't received the resources yet to provide equitable resources based on those suggestions from Student Senate. In addition to that, we do have this review happening from an Indigenous lens in all of our school libraries. We're in process for that. It'll take approximately a year to complete. And after that, we plan to do it from an anti-Black racism perspective, considering also the different cultures that we represent. So it's a process in motion, as well as we're renewing resources, core resources for classroom use. We're also engaged in consultation with that. And we also are doing a renewal of secondary school English kits, starting with grade 12 for September of 2021, again with resources that are representative of the contemporary students we serve within the district.
Well, thank you very much. Tina, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, just noting your hand. Well, thank you very much for that really great presentation and all the questions and answers given. I want to note that, of course, we're live streaming, but these meetings are archived, and in the presentation, as parents and community members will see, they can access all those links, etc., and follow up on them, directly by noting them. And I know that someone at the board will be able to facilitate whatever additional questions that, anybody might have. So thank you very much for that. Any further questions? Okay. I do want to note that quite a bit ago, actually, a little midway through the presentation, perhaps even at the beginning of it, Trustee Amy Olmsted, the chair of Education Committee, has joined us. Welcome. And I do have some notes for announcements. Would you like to take over the chair, or should we just continue, Madam Chair?
Hi, I would love for you to continue, Madam Chair. You're doing a brilliant job.
Well, no, just bump in anytime you want, and watch the chat line and make sure that I'm keeping everything in order. Thanks.
I will do. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Trustee Trustee Cook and Trustee Higginson, who have been acting as Vice Chair to the committee before you could arrive. Thanks very much for that. So next presentation, Superintendent Howitt, item G2, the health and physical education update. And you'll be introducing our teacher consultant, Ms. Lewis Longmuir, I believe, as well. So we'll hear from you now. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am pleased to be here this evening to provide an update on the updated and revised health and physical education program. And I am delighted to have Andrea Lewis Longmuir, teacher consultant responsible for health and physical education, with me. If you could advance the slide, please. So there's been a few iterations, if you will, of the revised HPE curriculum since about 2015. With this most recent revision, the vision is not new with this curriculum. It is simply updated since 2018. So there have been multiple iterations until 2018, and now we have a final review and update. So the new curriculum includes updated expectations in a number of areas, and there are also new learning expectations focused on specifically some social emotional learning skills, which are to be taught not in isolation, but in connection with all parts of the curriculum. Opportunities to learn about mental health are enhanced in the new curriculum through the inclusion of the new expectations of mental health literacy. So the goal of the HPE elementary curriculum has remained the same, with the exception of the first goal. And it's a shift from living skills to social emotional skills and a more explicit connection to mental health. And on the previous slide, or on this slide here, you could see that the difference is the nuance in fostering positive mental wellness. There are 4 sections within the curriculum. The first dedicated to social and emotional learning, again, integrated into all other parts of the curriculum, active living, movement and confidence skills, concept and strategies, and lastly, healthy living, which includes the new topic of mental health. So the curriculum has been updated to respond again to the contemporary lives of students today, and some examples of where the new mandatory learning has been introduced has been on the topics here on the screen: bullying and online safety, cannabis education and vaping. New as well has been awareness around concussion and learning for all grades, the concept of consent under the human development and sexual health component of the curriculum. Mental health has been embedded throughout the curriculum, and now it's mental health literacy as the new topic, and an introduction to social emotional learning skills. So strand A of the curriculum is social emotional learning skills. So the key change is that it is related to the inclusion of these learning skills within the HPE curriculum, not in isolation. So in all grades, learning related to the expectation is this strand occurs in the context of learning related to the 3 other strands. Research shows and demonstrates that social emotional learning also connect to the ability to learn, to build resilience, and to thrive. So the importance of the social emotional learning skills not only connects to the health and well-being, but also reinforces the curriculum, and that the social emotional learning skills have in direct connection to academic performance. And you'll see with the updated math curriculum, there is also a component on social emotional learning. So they believe that there is a direct correlation between developing those learning skills through resiliency and helping students to thrive. Strand D is the healthy topics of the curriculum. And so human development and sexual health education is more than simply teaching young people about anatomy and physiology of reproduction. Updates to this area reflect the knowledge and skills students need to make sound decisions about matters affecting their physical and mental health and well-being before they actually experience the real life situations in which these decisions need to be made. So students have the opportunity to learn about healthy human development in ways that are geared to their age group and stage of development. As you are aware, based on ministry guidelines, each board was to develop an exemption policy, which the board has developed and passed in the previous year. In terms of updates to mental health and literacy, there's a focus on building mental health literacy and its enhanced opportunities to learn about important connections between physical and mental health. So the big key message is mental health is an essential component to overall health. That messaging comes through time and time again in the revised curriculum. And I'm going to pass it to Andrea to talk about our resources, programming, and professional development. Once you have the curriculum, it's important that you ensure that the appropriate resources, professional development, and supports are there for staff to make it a reality in the classroom. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done to do just that for educators in the Greater Essex. So I pass it to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Clara. Clara mentioned earlier in the presentation that we truly are a resource-rich board. So I'll touch upon some of the ones that we've shared just in the last year or have been using ongoing with our educators. OFIA is our primary go-to spot for the most up-to-date and current information, as well as identifying the minimum standards of risks within our board. These are some of the resources that educators are currently using. OFIA was outstanding during our first closure in the spring at coming up with some HPE at-home resources that provided educational and developmental, mentally focused curriculum-linked resources for not only educators, but parents and caregivers to use at home. We rely on their elementary resources and secondary as well. Specifically, I've just got the grades 1 through 8 up here, but they provide ready-to-use lessons that are specific to the revised curriculum and are constantly being updated. And of course, they have a wealth of information when it comes to our healthy living topics. I've just put an example up here to some new information that's come with the updated curriculum in the area of concussion, because some of those were not there previously. So this is an example of some grades 6 to 9 lessons that teachers can access there as well. Additionally, we've most recently purchased with some ministry funding some additional OFIA resources that will be provided for every elementary school in our system. The goal of purchasing these specifically was to really engage kids in movement. Because of additional time that we spent behind screens, it's really important that we're supporting DPA and active movement throughout multiple points throughout the day. So these resources are meant to support educators in that realm. But our consistent messaging has really been about the importance of being physically active and how it has a positive impact on everyone's physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being with all of that. We have also purchased this resource called Fair and Square. This one was actually created specifically by CIRA Ontario. We also have a membership with them, and they are an affiliation with OFIA itself. And in this one, every school also got a copy. The reason it was called Fair and Square is because kids participate through all the activities in a 2 by 2 meter square. So we can ensure the social distancing. And again, the games that were created in here, the majority of them use little or no equipment. So it was perfect timing for us in the fall when we were trying to follow and maximize our safety protocols that were in place. So educators the feedback has been very positive from this as well. And this is something that we're proud to share. This is a resource that was created by educators in our board, and every educator in our system this fall was supplied with a copy of this flip chart. This was specifically created to support the implementation of DPA in our schools. And additionally, we identified one HPE champion in every school who then came for a half day of PD, where we got them up and jumping around and using some of these games so they could then take them back and share them within their schools. We also know that there's been an increased time in the virtual learning environment. So we really needed to support our educators with what virtual learning looks like, or what phys ed looks like in the virtual learning environment. So we provided an online resource chart for educators that has a variety of everything from physical activity to health topics. And we have an elementary HPE SB group, which we have tried to put everybody in the virtual world and correspondence and a virtual school into this place in order to support them. Our number one goal has really been about the safety components of what phys ed looks like in a safe way, safe and active way. Again, with that repeated daily breaks to get kids up and moving to support their well-being. It's also been through School Mental Health Ontario that they have provided a kit of resources and learning opportunities that have been provided to bolster student mental health and support the well-being of educators. These are classroom-ready resources that are being shared and can be used in a face-to-face environment or in a virtual world as well. Many of these activities, and it's ongoing, I've gotten updates most recently with some newest ones that are being shared, are shared across the system through, and they're also shared through our Greater Essex Student Wellbeing GECDSB group as well. So more opportunities to support educators. Another great resource that was shared through the Office of Dr. Pike was Everyday Mental Health Classroom Resource. They were printed on index cards and distributed to every educator in the system. The beautiful aspect of these is it was to support mental health, but they're perfect for our social emotional learning. Because social emotional learning is a newer concept in the health curriculum, it's a beautiful blending of ways to implement and help teach and support mental health, and even through the lens with the social emotional piece. We also have ongoing supports that are being developed by School Mental Health Ontario, specifically for the purpose of promoting wellness during these challenging times. They're offering opportunities like virtual learning or virtual learning tours, I guess. They're also supporting lessons specifically to support mental health learning. In elementary specifically, they're based on social emotional learning skills and mental health literacy. And for secondary, they're more specific to the mental health piece of it, specifically building on the understanding of mental health and mental illness, signs of mental illness, and where to go to if they need additional supports put into place. In speaking to Charisse Polly, she is working as we're moving into quadmester 3. We're looking for ways in order to support some of the educators in terms of the substance abuse and addictions piece of the learning that's happening through this quadmester. So she is working with social workers to develop lesson plans in order to support educators. And of course, we all know about Fit Week. It's our annual competition that we have. It focuses for staff and for students, healthy choices, active living, and in wellness. Last year's theme was Invest in Yourself. We know that we have a logo competition, and as you can see on the screen, these were our student and our staff logo contest winners. And GEEP was wonderful last year in terms of how they were supporting educators through the pandemic. They offered a variety of virtual workouts, nutritional goal setting, learning about finances, investing, Reiki. It was quite impressive what GEEP worked with our board to support staff. And I even got educators on board to provide videos to engage families in it. So we had different ideas for obstacle courses and activities that families could do with their students during Fit Week as well. In terms of HPE program, there's just a few here that I would like to highlight. This one is our outdoor ed program. And there's a variety of opportunities in outdoor ed that really connect nicely to the health and physical education curriculum. These are two examples here. Life Stories are virtual field trips that feature local natural sites, and they're facilitated by naturalists. For example, from IRCA. It's a great way to connect with nature and support well-being. The other one is an opportunity through YLCC, which is our Youth Leadership Camp of Canada. Previously, we had many of our leadership classes in grade 12 attend this in location, but because we can't do that, YLCC is now offering a virtual course, and we have quite a few leadership classes and teachers engaging in this opportunity. And the focus on this is really offering learning that's related to the key pillars of well-rounded, successful leadership. Summer learning, we all know, looked very different, and we weren't able to host the entire active afternoons. So in order to provide movement opportunities, we focused on opportunities of those frequent breaks. So for educators, we supported them with primary and junior ideas for engaging the kids in DPA to keep them active throughout the morning of learning. And in terms of professional learning, this first one was an awesome opportunity that came across from the Advanced Coronary Treatment, or ACT Foundation. And we partnered with them and we offered a training session for our grade 9 phys ed teachers. The ACT Foundation is spearheading this initiative to establish CPR and defibrillation training in high schools to ensure that all youth will graduate with the skills and knowledge to save the lives. So this is a perfect complement to our grade 9 phys ed curriculum, because this is the ideal. This is one of the specific expectations that exists within this curriculum. Teachers that participated were then given the materials that were needed then to support the instruction back in their schools. I also offered summer learning PD. This was great for new teachers and or people that were new to teaching phys ed or hadn't really investigated the new curriculum yet. The goal of this session was to give them an overview of the key changes that happened within the curriculum, to give them a deeper understanding of the social emotional learning and the mental health components of it. And it was really where to go to show them all of the vast majority of resources that we have within our system. And they were also able to leave with some wonderful resources to start in September with as well. This one made my heart happy because I'm also on the central office math team. So this one connects the idea of mathematics and physical education. I've always felt if we want to mathematize our phys ed, we definitely get more people being more active during our instructional time. So this is actually an OFIA resource called Activity Counts, which introduced fundamental math concepts to students in a fun and engaging way. So it integrates math pedagogy with physical activity through purposeful tools and strategies like jumping on number lines and whatnot. So kids were able to participate in math class through fun physical activity. And this, of course, was developed by Charisse Polly, our mental health lead, and the supporting staff. We all engaged, all educators did engage in this mandatory mental health learning upon return in September to give us this overview. And of course, and Tina shared components of this too. This is PD on demand. It's ongoing learning for educators that we offer. And on this screen, you'll just see some of the many sessions that were offered that connect directly to health and physical education and well-being as well. This is from a series of departments that are all working together to be responsive to the needs that are in the system. And this is an example of a PD on demand that connects nicely. It's a book talk called The Third Path, which outlines a relationship-based approach to education and the conditions that simultaneously support well-being as well as achievement. We've offered this to across the system, and now we have whole schools that are engaging in this with their staff as they look for ways to be responsive to the needs of their students. So with that, I'm going to conclude the presentation, and I will open up the floor for any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Are there any questions from any trustees? Trustee Hickison, you have a question.
I do. Thank you very much to Superintendent Howard and to Ms. Lewis Longmire for that presentation. We know that mental health in our schools, both in our students and our staff, is a significant concern for all of us. Those of us who are parents, who have kids in this, for those of us who are our trustees here, and those of us who are staff are very concerned. and the kind of first line of defense there is often the relationship that teachers have with their students, which is second to almost none. And this resource, and this is coming to mind because I was on a call just this week where they're putting extra funding into this resource for the action kit, the mental health action kit. And so I'm wondering, I saw in the PD days that you had spoke about that there is some emphasis on solving on some strategies. Is the toolkit incorporated into those professional development days in a sort of deliberate way, or is it a set of resources that can be used in addition to the professional development that's being done in those days?
It's being used in addition to the professional development days. It's just hit, like I get monthly, I am the liaison between OFIA and our board. So I will get monthly updates, and it's just coming out now. So it's a brand new resource. Bits and pieces of it have been shared. That comes through the mental health minutes that Charisse will put out for the educators, and then the pieces that are updated through those EDSB groups, or ones that come out in e-blast across the board. But as they are, those ones that are specifically the lesson plans, they are in the process of being created right now. We don't have them in hand, but that will be something that as we have those opportunities to share with educators or ones that are connecting with us specifically to look for that information, we are trying to blanket the system with that information, and definitely could look to that for an opportunity to provide PD to the system as well. Right now we're working within the February, March, April mode of the PD to be responsive to those needs. So that might be something then, once those are forthcoming, something that we can definitely keep on my radar and work with Charisse to provide PD for that as well.
I will defer to Superintendent Pike as well.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. We have got many resources coming from School Mental Health Ontario. We're happy to partner with our folks in program in order to get information out in multiple ways. So it shouldn't be just coming from one department. This is a commitment on behalf of the board. So when Andrea was speaking to some of the resources, they've just been published today. So it's actually going out to the system through the principals and through e-blasts beginning tomorrow and Thursday. And it is expectation that all of our teachers are continually thinking of ways to incorporate these lesson plans, these skills, these strategies in their classrooms every day. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from trustees? Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Andrea, you mentioned at the top of your presentation that we're a resource-rich system with regard to the materials we use, and you certainly went over most of them, I'm sure. But what happens when the kids are back in school? Hopefully will be fairly soon, but will you be able to make use of these all these virtual lessons and tools you have for physical education?
Absolutely. Most of those can be adaptable to whatever the learning environment we can, and that's why we in part selected a lot of them. They can be used face-to-face in virtual environments, or even some of them can be adapted to correspondence packages with just a modification. It just depends on the learning environment, but absolutely 100% they can be used in many ways.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the first time? I have a question. It's similar to Trustee Hickeson's, a little different. I'm always reminded that trustees are the only elected officials in the province that are charged with the promotion of and the governance of well-being of students, children and youth. And you've given us a great presentation on all, a lot of what we're doing and the wraparound nature of that and how it can be embedded. And I think that our resources and how we're going to implement them are great. But how do we assess? How do we assess what we're doing is having a positive impact? In order to govern well-being, it's an elusive thing. We haven't been given any rubrics, and in these times, the concern, I'm going to say that Trustee Hickinson, spoke about, and I think we all share. How do we know what we're doing is actually making a positive impact? What are the rubrics? How do we assess that we can flag things that we need to resource more, or so that we know how the students are doing? And I say that from a physical fitness, physical wellness, but particularly the mental wellness that we know is really under stress amongst the children and youth in our system.
I'm going to start off with a response in terms of the health and physical education. We are constantly in a process of conducting an environmental scan on the work that we do and if it's supportive of teachers and effective in the classrooms. I'll give you an example in this particular year of the implementation of a health and physical education program and what it looked like in the context of the different scenarios. We did work with our unions in collaboration of support for teachers and sought active input from our teachers of what was working, ideas that they had to help ensure that our programs were accessible and that health and physical education was occurring regardless of the context that we were in. So that is one of the ways that we do that. And I'm going to defer to my colleague, Superintendent Pike, for a commentary specifically about mental health and well-being.
Thank you. All of the information, lesson plans, classroom ready resources, minds-on activities coming from School Mental Health Ontario are all evidence-based. So it's not that we've got someone just making up things. It is coming through, it's been tested rigorously to ensure that we're getting to the topics and to the concepts that we want to get to, and it's really based on developmental. So when we talk about how can we measure it, it's a tough question. We do have our school climate survey, which is conducted every 2 years. And we do have quite a lot of questions to do with mental health as just one component of it. And we do compare those 2 years. And some of our schools actually are doing on a yearly basis to judge to see if the activities that they've put in or the measures they've put in within their classes and in their school are working. At the beginning of the year this year, we did ask 5 questions to take a temperature of where kids were. It was voluntary. As I noted at one of the other public meetings, we did get over 5,000 responses from our students. But it is hard to rely on just school climate surveys, because you can imagine this is the year we're supposed to do a school climate survey. I would think it would be very difficult, and it would be difficult to compare 2019 results to pandemic 2021 results. So when we do talk about measurement, we try to do it in a very small, particular way, depending on the initiatives that we roll through. But we do typically, except for pandemic years, rely on our school climate surveys and working with our schools on individual goals. Thank you.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you. I'm going to ask further, though. You can imagine, I mean, that we're getting anecdotal concerns from parents and families. It's just the reality. And I would imagine the climate survey given at the beginning of the year, the answers could be quite different after two months of, enforced isolation, basically. And so is there anything additional that we can do this year while it's underway before we get back to whatever the the new normal will be? is there anything additional that we can do to take the temperature? Or perhaps could we hear maybe, I don't know, a report from Ms. Polly or something, something about what the state of affairs is right now. I think for our role as advocates for well-being, I think we're all trying to get that message across. I think the ministry is responding, but I think it's also very important to really understand from, you know, taking that temperature now and not waiting for just something that is cyclical in 2 years. Is it a possibility?
I'll start with this in terms of gathering voices of staff, students, parents in the system. We are launching a virtual school learning committee actually in a little over a week. And part of that process will also be gathering data from our students, our staff, and our families about what has worked during this most unusual year and where there are areas of improvement. And I would anticipate that, you know, some of the opportunities or challenges have been with the imposed circumstance that we're dealing with. So that will be a place where we'll be gathering data from the system to help us reimagine possibility as we continue under the pandemic and the residual impact and beyond the pandemic. I'm also going to once again defer to my colleague Sharon, to Superintendent Pike, my apologies, to add to the response.
Thank you. At the very beginning of the pandemic, and this would be in March, April, May, when we had the school shut down, we did not have very many referrals to social work for services. And I'm sure that other people on the line can speak to their own particular organization. But in our case, we were a little bit perplexed by that. That is no longer the case. We are getting referrals to our social workers and to our attendance counselors, coming fast and furious. So that's really showing that we need to provide these resources, which we are, to our classrooms. I don't want you to think that working with students on mental health and well-being is just the role of one or the other. It's all of our role as we go through. So when you ask the question about what can we do, certainly we are going to be taking a temperature, even though it's the cyclical big school climate survey. Regardless if we're doing that, we are going to be asking the questions again that we did ask in September and see where they are now. So that was very simple in terms of what the questions were and seeing by age group if we're seeing increases or decreases so that we're able to adjust our strategy appropriately based on that particular data. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and thank you for even noting that there was a difference in that there was more uptake on our social work, because we are very proud of that department and all of our staff that offer that, and that means a lot that it's being you know, used and taken advantage of. That's great. I see a second question from Trustee Higgison. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. And it's in, I was kind of sparked by, and maybe Superintendent Howitt can explain a little more about the committee that you're starting up next week. You kind of mentioned something about it, and maybe I missed some detail about it. But it's interesting, as you're talking, my teenager's walking through the room, and it struck me that what I might think of as what she needs may not be what she needs. And where I might think she's doing okay, maybe she's not. And the converse might also be true. So I'm wondering and I don't know why this didn't strike me earlier, but just as I'm kind of staring at my own kids and thinking about how they've just been inside all day on screens, and I'm just wondering where student voice is represented in the needs, and I know that it comes through in our surveys, and I'm so grateful for all the responses to that survey. I'm just wondering where else it comes in the kind of supports that we offer and the ways that we approach this topic for our students, where we are learning from them the things that they need.
I'm going to start by deferring to my colleague Sharon and Superintendent Pike, and then I will jump in.
Great, thank you very much. You know, that's a really good question, because it's what we as adults think children need, and it's got to be what the children telling the adults what they need. So in some of the new resources that we're promoting to the system, there's one particular one, which I'm just going to highlight briefly, and it is called the Class Conversation Starters. And this actually provides questions, and it gives educators the confidence in order to ask the question, knowing that on the flip side of the card, or the resource electronic, that there's answers for them. So this is how we're going to elicit finding out where kids are. And this is where I spoke to earlier, that it can't just be once and we're done. It's got to be continual in the classroom as the weeks roll by in order to take the temperature. And then from there, we do have specific, very itemized presentations that can be provided to certain classes. If they're seeing that one class is struggling with X, that they could be asking for different supports to come to the classroom specifically for that topic. So it's not, as you know, we, as a department, we've always been looking at sleep, or I should say the lack of sleep that some of our students are engaged in or not getting, I guess. And that would be one thing that we originally had thought 2 years ago, we really pushed hard on it. The pandemic has even made that even more noticeable about sleep patterns and routines. However, we want to make sure that we're meeting the students where they're at, and so they would be working with their social worker in order to provide whatever resources or whatever tools they need, or actually having them come in to do a presentation. So listening to students is essential as we go through this. I'm very pleased to say that we are meeting with Student Senate. We've already met preliminary about student mental health. And we're actually meeting with them at the end of this week to talk further with the full group. What do they need? What are they seeing? Because we want to hear their voice. And I'll defer back to you, Superintendent Howard.
Thank you, Superintendent Pike. I just going back, Trustee Higginson, to the first part of your question in terms of the committee. Both myself and Superintendent Josh Canty are part of conversations with other superintendents who are responsible for virtual schools in our respective districts. And we're looking at what has worked and what might be a possibility beyond the pandemic. Gathering input from our parents, our staff, and our students will be very important in that process in trying to reimagine what the new normal will be and what innovation might be.
Thank you.
Thanks once again to teacher consultant Lewis Longmuir and Superintendent Howitt and Superintendent Pike for that very good presentation. You know, as I said before, we haven't met for a couple of months, and a lot is 3 months, I suppose. A lot has happened in the meantime that affects this committee, and I really appreciate that update. That was very good. I'm assuming no other questions. I didn't see any other hands up. I didn't see anything else. So we will go on to item G3. Before we do, I just wanted to say in the presentation, we saw the acronym OFEA, and that is the Ontario Physical Education, Physical and Health Education Association. So that's that professional resource that we access all the time. So I just didn't see it on the screen. So for anybody watching or accessing it, that's what it is. So on to G3, the glimpse of learning in the virtual school. And Superintendent Howitt, you're on.
Thank you, Trustee Burgess. In meeting with the chair and vice chair of the Education Committee, they asked if there would be a possibility that we could provide an update on virtual learning to the Board of Trustees. And so in our discussions, we decided on providing a glimpse at each of the education meetings. And in January, I had the opportunity to spend a couple days jumping into various classrooms. And I spent about 5 minutes in each classroom. And so meeting with Superintendent Canty and the principals of the virtual school, Wesley Arthur and Dustin O'Neill, we decided to put together a little compilation to give you a look of what it looks like on a typical day, popping into multiple classes in our virtual school. I hope you enjoy this.
My name is Dustin O'Neill, and I am the principal of the Greater Essex Elementary Virtual School. You may be wondering what life is like for students and staff who work at the virtual school. Well, this video is an attempt to answer exactly that question. Let's take a short tour. Our first stop will take us to a few of our virtual classrooms where students learn literacy and numeracy online using Microsoft Teams and other digital platforms.
Oh, bravo, mes amis.
Teaching and learning in the virtual school can include whole group direct instruction on topics such as math. It can include small group instruction and guided reading. And that's reflected in the picture here with the two girls when we see their feet. And it can also include one-on-one support for students with their work.
Kaylin is really thriving in the correspondence program because we can take breaks as she needs and work at her pace.
Learning at the virtual school through Gaines Correspondence looks like learning through hands-on materials and participating in fun and engaging activities that are specified to meet the students' individual needs.
It is quite amazing how well I've gotten to know my students and their families through the correspondence program and interacting through daily conversations with them.
Leslie Arthur, principal of the virtual secondary school. And at this point in the tour, we'd like to take you to a couple of our classrooms to see what teaching and learning looks like at the secondary level.
What is a refugee camp? Okay. Where is Parvana's family? That's a good one. That's one of the questions that's really been hanging over the book the whole time. How did Parvana learn how to live independently? That's a good one. We see a lot of that going on, so we could explore that question.
J'aimerais que tu montres ici sur l'écran de qui tu parles, ok? Alors, tu peux commencer. Merci, Alex.
J'ai choisi Elijah J. McCoy. Il est un Canadien remarquable parce qu'il était un inventeur et ingénieur d'origine afro-américaine au Canada.
Our students have opportunities to explore topics that they're very passionate about, and then communicate using new literacies, creating presentations and videos.
I think the text messages to every phone computer that they know.
So you think that like text messages are an example of them talking together?
Yeah.
My plan is to sketch the Mars Curiosity rover on a 1/20th scale. Then I want to 3D design on Fusion 360 the Mars Curiosity rover on a 1/20th scale. So from my sketches, take the sketches and put them into the software.
Aujourd'hui à vous, météorologue Alex Train pour la météo de CBC, et nous avons un temps actif qui se développe pour la dernière semaine de l'hiver.
At the virtual school, we want to make sure our students are safe, connected, and learning every day. We also want them to learn about equity, kindness, and good citizenship.
This year has been tough for everyone. With the pandemic, we have certainly felt alone at one time or another, but many of us have been living comfortably, whereas others haven't been as lucky.
Many people have lost their homes, their jobs, and are facing uncertain times. The holidays are all about giving, so this holiday season, let's give back to our community.
Finally, we want to make sure that our students have fun and enjoy their experience.
It's obviously different, but it's really fun, and we get to see new faces, and we also get to collaborate a lot, which I really enjoy, and I like working in groups.
Students get to learn, compete, and make new friends with esports.
So that was just a glimpse into some of our elementary and secondary classrooms in our virtual school. And next month, we look forward to bringing another brief presentation to the Board of Trustees, again, providing a glimpse into the work that's happening in the Greater Essex County virtual school, elementary and secondary level.
Thank you for that. And we look forward to that because we don't get to glimpse. You know, normally some of us may be going into our schools for this readathon or that particular event, or and that does give us a glimpse into every day during the class. So thanks very much for that. We look forward to other ones. Trustees, we are now at item H. There are no delegations that gave notice, and there isn't anybody on the speakers list, item I. There isn't any new business, item J. There aren't any reports to be received, so we're at L, trustee question period. Are there any questions for Education Committee this evening? Are there any questions for this committee? I think maybe we've asked them all. Are there any, hearing none, I will go on to item M, notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion for this committee? Are there any announcements for this committee? No? Okay. So before we adjourn, I do have some announcements, and I will go to the first one. Tomorrow, the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit is going to update us on their local epidemiology regarding school-aged children and youth in the morning in their daily reporting. So Dr. Ahmed said today he'll be sharing his thoughts that are forming his opinion about recommendation for in-person school attendance and the risks and benefits of in-class learning. He recognized that since the majority of our staff hasn't taught in class since early December, he'll be discussing the appropriate refreshers, and of course with our administration, for everyone that concerned, so that they would be best prepared for a safe reopening, including understanding the new protocols for student masking and break room and staff room regulations, etc. So we've had some positive trends in this last week. So I encourage those who can find what Dr. Ahmed and the WECHU have to say on the WECHU YouTube channel tomorrow morning. February also launches the official junior kindergarten and kindergarten registration period. Junior kindergarten registration is highlighted from February 15th to the 26th, with the virtual open house scheduled for February 17th. So I encourage all parents to mark your calendars for February 17th if you have little ones, to find out more information at our website, which is, of course, publicboard, all one word, publicboard.ca. And final announcement, we know that Black Lives Matter and Black History Month is being celebrated throughout all of February here throughout the GECDSB. And our staff will be using our updated Roads to Freedom curriculum document to engage students both virtually and, once classes are safe, to return in person about the history and reality of Black lives. So to acknowledge that, I'd like to dovetail on the City of Windsor's announcement today of renaming a city park in honor of Mary E. Bibb, who amongst her many accomplishments was a Black teacher in our district and who chose to lead instead of follow. Today, Marianne Mulhern, Windsor's poet laureate, shared her poem, Pathway to the Stars. And I'd like everyone to look at our logo, because it so aligns with our logo of children reaching for the stars, this moment in time, and honors a Black woman who founded in Sandwich Town, not far from our Brock School, a school for Black children who, because of racism, weren't allowed to attend public schools alongside white children. Mary Bibb taught the students attending that school. And I'd announce the poem by also reading it. So this is Pathway to the Stars in honor of Mary E. Bibb. Mary Bibb, a young Black teacher, taught children of her race here in Windsor. She pointed to the heavens, invited Black children to reach for the stars in a time when Black children were kept away from books, gateways to the universe of learning. All the magic of words written on doors Mary Bibb opened to them, their brothers and sisters, their children. Are there any other announcements? So, Madam Chair, for item I1 on our blue agenda, there's no recommendations coming from the Education Committee. And having concluded all our business, I will now announce that this meeting is adjourned. I would imagine we have a 5-minute bio break before we reconvene into finance and operations.
I think we can permit that, yes.
waiting for the go-ahead from you. Okay, good evening, everybody. It is 9:02, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Standing Committee for Operations and Finance. It is our first meeting of 2021, but also this organizational board year. So I was elected as the new chair, so welcome. And thank you for having me, I guess. In attendance, we have all the trustees. I believe Trustee Olmsted joined us and is here again, so we're all in attendance. I'm just going to go to approval of agenda. I saw Trustee Hatfield move that. Can I get a seconder? Looks like Trustee Sartori. Thank you. Okay, any discussion on the agenda? And I'm going to do the any opposed method. So I will just go through things with any opposed. Okay, and that carries. Declaration of conflict of interest. Any trustees needing to declare conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none. I see that Trustee Sartori is moving the minutes. Can I get a seconder? I see Trustee Hatfield. Any opposed? Oh, sorry, any discussion on the minutes? Okay, any opposed? And that carries. Okay, business arising from the minutes. Was there any business arising from the minutes from any of the trustees? These would be from the November 3rd meeting. No, I'm not seeing any. I'd like to give it a second just with the technology lag. I did have one question actually, arising from the minutes. Oh, I see Trustee Burgess has one as well, and Trustee Higgison. Okay, Trustee Burgess, you go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just a question on, we had asked for updates on installation of ventilation and things like that. So I'm just wondering, will we be getting an update on any kind of, plant and facility updates?
This is Superintendent Armstrong through you, Madam Chair. Certainly we can provide updates to the trustees regarding that. We can do that at a future meeting. I also have Juliana Hinchliff, our Manager of Facility Services, on the line, and she could probably provide a brief update at this time if you would like.
Trustee Burgess, is that something that you would like right now as part of that question?
Well, if there is an update to it was asked last time in business arising, and I know there were ongoing, retrofits and some new protocols that have come into place since we last met on November 3rd. So I'm just wondering if there are any updates, and if it's timely to give them now. It can wait to the regular board meeting if you want, but.
Thank you. I'm sure that Ms. Hinchliff would be able to provide an update for you.
Thank you very much to you, Madam Chair. From the November 3rd meeting, we continue to operate the ventilation system for prolonged hours during the school day. They start at 4 a.m. and run till past 6 p.m. at night, which is not typical of what we do. We also provide maximum outdoor ventilation as much as possible. Unfortunately, with the cold weather, there are limitations to that for the safety of the equipment and also for the comfort of the occupants. Also, we have installed over 300, I'm guessing now, I think 360 air purifiers in areas where there is no forced air ventilation systems. We have installed MERV 13 filters in all areas and continue to fight aggressively to get the supply. It is, of course, a very popular item. We did receive a shipment and we have installed them. We continually check our ventilation systems on a monthly basis to ensure they are functioning properly. We have also solicited through the federal government additional funding in response to their ask for upgrades to ventilation systems in schools that have limited ventilation, and also replacement of ventilation systems in other schools. We are awaiting that the go-ahead from the federal government for that. We strive always to use the funding that has been provided for these in an effective way that provides the best bang for the buck. So that's the update.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any follow-up to that?
That'll do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Trustee Higgison now for your business arising from the minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this could be pretty quick because it may have been answered in a roundabout way by Ms. Hinchliffe. I'm wondering if about the resilience infrastructure stream that we had kind of talked about. It's under new business, J1 of our minutes. And I'm wondering if that's in addition to that federal funding that you were just talking about, or if we have any projects supported by the Resilience Infrastructure Fund and whether they're on track to being finished in that near impossible timeline that they were given to be finished. I'm wondering if we can get an update on that.
This is Superintendent Armstrong through you, Madam Chair. The board was asked in November to submit for projects under that funding. And we did put a submission in of approximately 16.6 million of a variety of projects, ventilation being one component that we submitted for funding for. As Ms. Hinchliffe noted, that request was sent through to the ministry, to the province, and we're still waiting to hear back from there. It gets nominated, obviously, to the federal government, and we have not received any official confirmation yet from the federal government in terms of the projects that will be supported based on our submission. But hopefully, we will see something coming through for that, and we'll certainly provide you with an update as soon as we hear.
Thank you very much for that. Any supplemental there, Trustee Higgison?
Just a question about the timeline of the projects must be completed by December 31st, and we haven't even heard yet, and it's February 2nd. I'm sure we could spend $16 million pretty quickly, but as far as trades are concerned, that may be an issue. Do we see any opportunity for extension on that completion date?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. That is a great question, and it's certainly something that a lot of the boards have been expressing concern about. The projects that we specifically put forward for that funding were ones that we felt we had the most success or the most chance to have completed by December 31st of 2021, which is when those projects need to be completed. So certainly we were selecting projects that we felt we could do it on time. As well, we are working with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services and the OECM, a collaborative marketplace, so that like projects that many boards are going to be working towards, like, for example, bottle filling stations, air purifiers, ventilation systems, things of that nature. There'll be a collaborative procurement for all of the boards through that process, because we do recognize that there will be a significant demand in terms of the marketplace for a number of items with respect to that funding. And so certainly we're hopeful that that will help facilitate the process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was actually going to be my question on the resilience fund, so infrastructure funding. So thank you, Trustee Higgison, for covering that. Is there any further business arising from the minutes? I am going then to move on to item G, presentations. The first presentation that we have tonight is 2021 to 2022 budget timelines. I believe this presentation will be given by Superintendent Armstrong and Sean Mayhew. And so I will turn it over to them now. I believe they're going to be sharing their screen for a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to welcome Sean Mayhew, who is our Manager of Finance. And Sean's going to be providing you with a brief update in terms of the upcoming budget timelines for 2021-22. And as well, he's going to also provide you with an update as well in terms of the revised estimate submission that was sent to the ministry in December. And with that, I'd be happy to turn it over to Mr. Mayhew.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. Sorry, bear with me just a moment. I'm just trying to get my desktop to work. Okay. If I can ask, Madam Chair, can you see the presentation right now? I think I have to back up to the, okay, great.
Yeah, we're on the agenda page.
Okay, great.
Now it's, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This brief presentation will review the timelines in the development of the 2021-22 budget. It seems like the past few years have been anything but normal, and expected timelines have not gone according to plan. However, we're very hopeful that the ministry information, such as the technical paper and GSN, is released on schedule, and that timelines presented in these slides can occur according to that plan. Here's the agenda. There will be a quick overview of where we are at now based on the most recent submission of the 2021 revised budget to the ministry in December. More detailed information for the revised budget is included in your package as part of the quarterly report. Also, we will review the 2021-22 budget philosophy timelines and discuss some challenges, risks, and opportunities in that process. As mentioned, the revised budget was submitted to the ministry in December and presents a deficit of $8.4 million for ministry compliance purposes, representing 2% of the board's annual operating allocation. This deficit is made up of $957,000 of amortization of unsupported capital, which is primarily Better Places and LaSalle Public School, and $7.465 million of the use of accumulated operating surplus for COVID-19 expenses in excess of ministry funding. The revised estimates reflect increased funding and expenses for COVID-19, decreased funding due to a reduction in projected enrollment. We're projecting a decrease of 174 elementary students and 60 visa students or international students compared to the original projection. Increased staffing to accommodate alternative learning and other COVID measures. This increase is outlined in the quarterly report in your package in further detail. And then, of course, there's other minor changes in our estimates throughout the budget. Here's an illustration of the revised budget by category. The total revised expenses budget is approximately $481.5 million, excluding the impact of employee future benefit adjustments, which represents an increase of approximately $5 million from original projections, which were $476.5 million. Instruction here is the largest category, and that includes classroom teachers, teacher assistants, ECEs, textbooks, principals, school office. Here's another illustration of the $481.5 million of expenses that are budgeted by object. Salaries and benefits represent approximately 80% of the total expenses. And that's no different from prior years. Here's just a quick overview of the philosophy. The Greater Essex County District School Board develops its annual budget in a collaborative and consultative manner designed to support excellence in public education through confident learners, engaged communities, and ethical stewardship of its resources. The board manages its resources in a prudent manner to support individual needs of our students and communities while providing safe and welcoming school facilities for our staff and students. This slide reviews the internal timelines. In February, we communicate the internal timelines. Emails will be going out internally very shortly to all the managers of each budget area with instructions for them to review their budgets for the upcoming fiscal year. In February and March, those meetings with the directors, superintendents, managers, and finance staff occur. We discuss budget opportunities. We always attempt a zero-based approach where we look at the each individual's budget, their areas, any opportunities, any risks within their portfolio, ultimately with the idea of trying to achieve some cost savings wherever possible. In March, those budget templates are submitted and which are primarily made up of the non-salary budgets. In March and April, there's the development of staffing budgets. Enrollment projections are completed. Teaching staff allocations are provided accordingly based on those enrollment projections. And then, of course, there's the non-teaching staff allocation, which is determined at that time. In April and May, we compile all that information. We put it into the ministry forms that are known as EFIS, and that calculates our funding. And throughout that time as well, there's budget consolidation. We bring everything together. And of course, May and June, we meet with the director, and there's the final budget adjustments as necessary based on where the budget's landing. And of course, that kind of leads us into more of the external communications, which are timelines, which we'll discuss right now. And I should note that the budget is a standing item on the Directors Council agenda during that time period. Here are the external reporting timelines. January to February, there's GSN consultation with all the boards. The ministry consults with the various leaders at the boards to gather some input. In March, I should say typically in March, the GSN or technical paper is released, usually late March. And as soon as that's released, we provide an update to the trustees as to what the technical paper says, what the major changes are, and how those changes impact the board. From March to April, there would be public pre-budget consultation. And we provide the opportunity. We have an email set up at budget@publicboard.ca where that any questions can be sent in. In May, the budget update is presented to trustees. In June, we finalize a presentation and the budget to trustees, and there's the approval of the budget and ultimately the submission of the ministry forms as approved by the trustees to the Ministry of Education. This schedule presented, I said typically a lot because this is the typical timeline in a normal year. I'm not really sure what a normal year is anymore. Between the global pandemic, collective bargaining issues, government changes, etc., this schedule is beyond our control, really. I'd like to think that 2021 will follow this general timeline. I guess all we can do is take Muhammad Ali's advice and expect the best, but prepare for the worst. So we'll continue to be flexible as necessary, adjusting timelines accordingly, and continue to communicate changes that will impact our internal timelines. And consistent with the prior year, this presentation will be posted on the board's website in the Budget and Finance landing page, and any questions, again, can be sent to the budget@publicboard.ca email. As mentioned, the timelines may need to change. The main driver of the timelines is the release of the GSN and technical paper. This is also known as the funding formula. We can calculate our projected expenses all we want, but until we receive the ministry's funding formula, there's no way to bring it all together to determine our current financial position or deficit surplus and make necessary adjustments. At this time, it is unknown what COVID-19 implications will be for the 2021-22 2022 school year. This is a list of some of the implications we have experienced thus far, and these same implications could continue into the next fiscal year. And there's a list there. Virtual learning models will be an implication. Class cohorting have impacts on the budget, as well as student transportation, PPE requirements, the ventilation, as we've discussed, impacts on the international student program, and other technology and device needs. This is an overview of the largest pressures our board is facing. Changes in funding in the GSN and PPF will require adjustments and may have an impact on programs, staffing. Enrollment projections continue to be a challenge in the current environment, and that may continue in the 2021-22 school year, affecting both regular and international student attendance. The board continues to carry a deficit in the area of special education, which is funded from other non-enveloped areas of the GSN. A significant number of students receive these services, and needs are continuously changing. And while updates to the funding formula have helped our board, the area of special education remains a significant cost to the board. As presented earlier, wages and benefits approximate 80% of the total budget. So any changes affecting those items can be significant and need to be reviewed thoroughly. Any other legislative requirements may have an impact, such as in the area of health and safety. Any changes there need to be considered. Changes to the minimum wage, those are just examples. Excess capacity in the system and aging infrastructure both need to be addressed continuously through difficult decisions. Absenteeism costs the board over $10 million each year, a number that you're all familiar with. It continues to be monitored closely and is always a risk to the budget when we prepare the budget. Commodity prices continue to increase as well as other third-party service provider rates, which will have an impact on expenses. Thank you for your time and attention, and we'll take any questions that you may have at this point.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayhew, for that presentation, and I will take questions from trustees now. Surprisingly, there aren't any. I take your point about the timeline and it not being normal. I've only been a trustee for 2 years now, a little over 2 years, and I don't think there has been a normal budget process. So I appreciated the detail of what we estimate will happen, but I don't know if I have as much hope as you do this year. I did have a couple of questions, but I'm just going to open it up to trustees again. Any other questions? No, okay, I just have one question. I don't know what slide it was, and it's on the 2020-21. Where are we now? And it says the deficit for compliance purposes includes, and then it has the 957,000 representing amortization of unsupported capital. But then the second point is 7.4, almost 5 million for the use of accumulating operating surplus for COVID-19 expenses in excess of ministry funding. Is that funding directly correlated with the 2% that we allocated from our surplus? Is that the same thing? And I was just wondering if, because in the point above it says we can spend 8.4 million. So I was wondering, is that the same number that we're looking at there?
This is Superintendent Armstrong through you, Madam Chair. Yes, the 7.4 million plus the 957 aggregates to the 8.4 million, representing 2%.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I was reading that correctly. And I'll note for trustees that we do have an interim financial report coming up as well. So I'm sure there'll be more questions around that as well. So, okay, so with that then, I will move on to the next presentation unless there are any other questions. No? Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to item G2, which is Service Quality Management System from Facility Services. Through you, Superintendent Armstrong, I believe that we have another presenter, Keith DeGroot. So I will pass it off to you both.
Thank you very much for that. And I wanted to introduce, welcome actually, and introduce Keith DeGroot. He's the process engineer at our Facility Services Department. And of course, Juliana Hinchliff, our manager of facility services, with us as well this evening. And I'd like to thank them too, because it's late, and I appreciate them sticking on the line to take us through a presentation on service quality. And so with that, I will turn it over to them.
All right, it's Keith DeGroot here. I'm a process engineer at Facility Services. So I'm going to talk about our quality management system. So Facility Services has been ISO certified for 18 years. That's since 2003. We're currently certified to the ISO 9001:2015 standard. That's the latest standard. Previously, we've been to the 2008 and 2000, the last two updates they've done. And to be certified, we do a 3-year cycle where we have recertification audits and surveillance audits. And we were recently recertified in 2019. And being certified ensures that we manage and function to at least the standards defined by ISO 9001. And our management system really is the way we do things, and it continually evolves and improves. And ISO is not actually an acronym for the International Organization of Standardization, who puts out the standard. It stems from the Greek word isos, meaning equal, or you can kind of translate that into standards. But so how do we do this? Well, at the core of all the ISO standards is the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle of continuous improvement. And what really that means is we do planning, we measure, we execute those plans, and then we continually modify what we're doing based on the measurements that we take. So we've got a lot of processes in place that keep us in line with that standard and help us do work. So how do we measure? We do it through our objectives. We've got 8 main objectives. And under those objectives, we set a variety of key performance indicators, or KPIs. And those KPIs help us measure our success. So those range from survey scores that we put out to principals, measuring our work order completion time, looking at our custodial cleaning. So if you look at one good example of an objective is we want to prevent accidents and injuries. And a KPI associated with that would be we want to reduce injuries that could be affected by facility services staff by 10%. So we keep striving in all these areas. We do measurements, and we see what we're doing, and we see how we can improve. So at the core of our stuff is our mission statement, and it's to enhance enrollment and support academic performance by partnering with all stakeholders to provide the best learning environment. And I think the really great thing about this is through these 18 years, we've had the same mission statement, and I think it's as relevant now as it probably was when we first set it up. We keep striving to partner with our schools, because we want to create that best learning environment, and that's really what facilities is here for. So with that kind of brief background, I'm going to jump into a few of the highlights that we've had recently, which includes our surveillance audit, the preliminary results of our annual survey, and some improvement initiatives that we've taken on. So the first one in November, we SGS conducted an audit on us. So to be ISO certified, you have to have audits performed by an accredited registrar. In our case, right now, it's a company called SGS, and they assign an auditor to sample how our management system is working. So this is the second year of a 3-year cycle. So this was our first surveillance audit of this cycle. So it was was a 3-day visit, and they review our management methods, how we deal with risks and opportunities, looking at our objectives, how we evaluate and correct our performance. And this year, the auditor chose to concentrate on maintenance and operations. It was a bit of a different audit. It was a virtual audit this year. So a couple of us went out to the schools. We took pictures for the auditor, and we arranged 10 virtual school visits where we set up a Teams meeting with custodians. So that worked out really well. The auditor does a great job at kind of talking to the custodians and really getting a good idea how we're operating in those schools. I think that she gets a pretty good sample of what's going on. So with that audit, we get a report and we get kind of a breakdown, and some of the key observations that were made were that our processes were consistently described at all the visited locations. So our custodians really knew kind of and were consistent on what we were doing. Showed that facility services could continue to improve its methods of identifying risks and opportunities. So that's something I'm going to expand on a little bit. That's one of our improvement initiatives we've taken on is really looking at risks and how we deal with that. Facility services could revisit its quality objectives to reflect the constraints experienced due to COVID-19. So she came in November and noticed, there was a lot of changes with the way we do business related to COVID. So we took a serious look at our objectives and our KPIs. And in fact, we said, creating that best learning environment, all our objectives still make sense, and we're still striving for the same thing. So, despite all the changes, our objectives remain the same and how we're measuring our success. A couple strengths you pointed out. One, our internal audits are thorough, and corrective action encourages a data approach to root cause analysis. So that was great to hear. We do audit ourselves. We review what we're doing. And it was certainly noted that we're pretty good at finding our own faults and looking to fix those. And the project to centralize, reorganize a hierarchy of paperless filing systems for access to documents and records. So that's another improvement initiative I'll kind of touch on again. Is something we've been recently trying to improve on. So that was our audit. The next big thing we have is our service quality annual survey. So this went out beginning in January with a duty. It goes out to all of our principals in a variety of categories. They rate us on how we are doing. We've been doing this survey for many, many years, and allows us to kind of gauge our progress year to year. At the time I put this together, we had 85% of schools returned their surveys. We since extended the deadline a little bit, and we're at 96% right now. In previous years, 70% was a good number, so we're pretty excited to get a really good picture of how we're doing from a school's perspective. Last year, we couldn't do our survey because of COVID. We didn't want to overwhelm the principals with one more thing to do. So our current results, when we had 85 responded, we're quite happy to see that we had improved in every category as far as the survey was concerned. So that was a cause for celebration at facilities. We will be compiling final results shortly, and I hope the trend for the first 5% sticks, and we see a lot of good stuff. Our next steps on our survey is we review all the comments provided by principals. We also take a very formal look at all of our zeros and ones. So if they've rated us unacceptable or needs improvement, we take a look at that, and we put together an action plan on how we are going to address those low scores. So now I just want to touch on some of our continuous improvement initiatives that we've been doing at facility services. And I think we've been doing some great stuff to keep getting better here. So one is our document management system. So it includes how we document, maintain, and train our staff on procedures, and what records we keep and how we keep them. We've set a schedule to review all of our procedures and to make sure that we are updating the training for all of our staff on what we do. And those updates, depending on the procedure, could range from every year we look at it or up to every 5 years. And right now we're just consolidating, finalizing some consolidation on our records. So we've assessed what we need to keep. We've associated majority of our records with a procedure, which is great because now we know why we're keeping those records. And we've moved as much as we could to electronic storage. And we're hoping this makes a big difference. We're actually going to assess how much paper we're ordering previous years versus this year. We've converted 17 forums, and in the last year, that's resulted in about 15,000 records being kept electronically right now. So along with that, I'll note we've got 88 standard operating procedures that we work on and we continually review. It had been up over 100, but as we reviewed them, we were able to eliminate a few, and we keep working on these and modifying them. And they're kind of what keeps our services consistent. When we're looking at doing things across so many different sites. So some of the great advantages of what we've been doing with document management is we've defined the location for all our records. Anyone can find stuff now. We've documented the reasoning for records, which has been great because as you get turnover in staff, some people may lose the knowledge of why we were doing what we were doing. When you have a lot of legislative requirements and things like that, it's great to know why it's there and what we're doing with it. And we've been reducing paper, and we've got more spacious work environments. And I wish I had a before and after picture of one of our offices, which looks so much nicer now without 2 large filing cabinets in it. The next big improvement initiative, and my favorite one, is what we've been doing with risk analysis. So the ISO 2015 standard focuses much more on risk analysis. And we've always done some stuff, like we've had a project management checklist when we're doing projects to make sure we cover things. When we do new buildings or major renovations, we have things to make sure we identify risks and complete our stuff, as well as when we're closing down a building or selling it. But what we've done now, we've implemented a full risk analysis process and a nice template that we walk through when we're making a change. And what this does is we're really starting to change our culture to more of a planning culture and identifying where we're making changes and making sure we do it right. So our risk analysis form, and I'm not going to read everything, but we go through describing the change because we really want to define what we're doing. How we're going to measure that and make sure it's successful. Identifying our stakeholders, which is a big thing that I think is really important because we look at who's affected by that change or that change in process, because then we can address their needs. We look at the risks, so we try to identify the possible negative risks as well as positive risks of what could go wrong or go really good, and we try to find out how we can exploit it or mitigate those risks. We look at the tasks we need to do to get that job done, identify any resources so we're not surprised, and we build a communications plan. And I think that's one of the keys is when we really look at who do we need to tell about this and what do they need to know. So this is a new thing we've been doing, and it's been quite successful. I can give you a few examples where we've already used it. The first one is the change in how we service fluorescent lighting. So facility services recently really changed most of our bulbs to LED. And the working at heights regulation has changed where you actually can't go as high without working at heights training. So we have changed the responsibility of changing bulbs from our custodial staff to our preventative maintenance staff, who are all trained on working at heights. But what this has done is we really looked at, where do we store the bulbs? How do we order the bulbs? How do we communicate these changes to a staff of custodians who are used to changing the bulbs? So going through that analysis really made this process smooth. We changed our contractor that performs our heating and cooling triage. And normally changing a contractor is not a risky change, but The timely resolution of heating and cooling problems is very important to our customers, to our schools, and important for learning. So we went through this process and we were identified a lot of things we needed to do. We identified stakeholders such as principals, and really looked at their need and said, their need is that it's seamless for them. So we did the work up front to make sure that happened. The other one is we've recently implemented air purifiers in certain classrooms. So when we did that, if we didn't go through this process, we could have missed a number of things. We would have missed, informing our joint health and safety committees at the schools. We could have missed, properly training our PM staff on how to set these up, or doing the periodic maintenance that's required on these systems, and communicating the placement criteria to principals, because if some classrooms are getting it and others aren't, we thought it was very important that the principals knew why that was happening so that they could communicate with their staff. So all this risk planning, it requires more work up front, but I think we avoid a lot of time spent correcting problems or dealing with misunderstandings. So that's been a great initiative we've taken on in the last year. The next one here is root cause analysis. So we've really revamped how we look at issues. So we have a red flag process where schools bring us issues, we identify our own issues. And we've really started dealing with, doing a full root cause analysis, looking at the problem and determining the real cause. We want to dig deep and find out what's really happening. It's an instinct of a lot of our supervisors and us to, we just want to fix that problem, and make our customer happy. And that's great, and that's part of it. But the part we're really trying to get down to is, what caused that in the first place? Because then we can fix it, and we might fix it across the system instead of just that, one location. So we're looking at that root cause analysis. We're using some analysis tools. So we get our red flag in, we do an investigation, and we do that root cause analysis. So what I got pictured here, this is a cause and effect diagram. And it's really just a brainstorming tool where you look at different areas, people, procedures, the machine, the environment, measurements, materials, and that may depend on the problem. And you brainstorm with the right group of people, and you can really get down to identifying the root cause. So that's one of the tools we've been using to do that. And I think this helps us to not have repeat problems and really solve stuff. So those are kind of a few of the highlights we've had as far as some of the initiatives we've been taking. Another thing I just want to touch on is COVID-19 and service quality. I mean, all through the night tonight, people have been talking about what's changed with due to the pandemic. And for us, our focus really remains the same. We're still partnering with stakeholders to create that best learning environment. I think having a quality management system has facilitated us making all the changes we needed to our cleaning procedures. Our custodians had their task lists and their maps, and we were just able to update those and train them quite quickly. It's certainly hampered our ability to connect. We have our supervisor meetings with principals, our manager meetings with principals. They're not able to get out there. They can virtually visit, but they can't, walk around the school with them and see what's going on. Last year we couldn't do our survey, which was a big one because that's one of our major methods to get our formal feedback. We had the inability to meet several objectives last year, and that was really due to the closures and instability that was happening in the spring last year. But on a positive note, I think because of our customer focus and our relationship building that we've been doing with our facility services staff and our schools and principals, I think that's helped a lot. With a lot of the changes that had to happen over the summer to prepare for this school year. So I think some kudos to our quality management system to really help us, with a lot of the changes that have been happening. So that is my quick kind of overview and some highlights of our quality management system. So if anyone's got any questions, certainly now would be a good time.
Thank you so much, Keith, for that presentation. I see a few questions here from trustees. I'm going to go to Trustee Higgison first.
Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Keith, for that presentation. I want to start off by congratulating you on the survey results for the Service Quality Annual Survey, and congratulations on it, because that is a significant amount of effort that goes into that, and that it's being realized at the level that you guys care about so much, which is your customers. I think it's so wonderful that you have that reflected, and I can clearly see and hear just in the way that you describe things, the pride that you have in what you do, and I'm so grateful for that, and I'm grateful that it's recognized out in our schools. And I think we've been able to, there's been kind of more eyes on the built environment and the kind of ways that it really impacts learning, impacts health, impacts safety, and impacts everything that we do when we teach and learn in these spaces and work in these spaces. And there's been so many changes, and you touched very briefly at the end there on COVID-19 and service quality. And I was struck by the changes to risk analysis with this 2015 ISO, where you say that there's it's much more focused on risk analysis than in previous versions. And then you talked briefly about the root cause analysis as well. And I'm wondering what sorts of complications or complexities have you noticed with having this 2015 ISO risk analysis change along with COVID-19, and whether you can see there being improvements to that based on those two things happening at once, or whether you can kind of isolate some of the system changes that you've made, that you've been able to make in relation to COVID-19 based on what you've adjusted to with this ISO 2015 change.
I guess I can say one thing with the pandemic and all the change that's come with it, it's given us a lot of opportunities to practice these new methods that we're trying to implement, especially the risk analysis. So I touched on one which was directly related to COVID, which was putting in air purifiers. So instead of just we've got, I forget how many Julie mentioned, some 300 air purifiers we got to put out in schools. Okay, let's just maintenance, go get them out there. We took the time to plan it out. And I think the key there was identifying communications, because there's a lot of things going on. I know principals got a lot going on, so we were able to kind of manage that and communicate it out. So I think two things kind of happening at the same time, us kind of having made that effort, and a lot of change with COVID has been been good practice. And even prior to that, there was a lot going on with labor and a lot of disruption there. So I think it's been good to practice, and I think it's been good to emphasize to our staff that these things are very valuable and necessary, and I think it's helped us with buy-in on our end as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go to Trustee Cheen, and then I also see Trustee Halberstadt's hand, and he will be next in the queue. Go ahead, Trustee Cheen. Oh, and I see Trustee Burgess as well.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It's very impressive and very detailed, and I know you have done a lot of job in such difficult situation. And my question is not particularly regarding this pandemic situation, but regarding the air conditioner of the school who has no air conditioner equipment, and because it has been there have been huge concern from the parents regarding the air conditioner issue. Like in Massey School, there is no air conditioner in almost all of the buildings, and the parents and the students do complain. I wonder, I talked about that before, and I know it's regarding the budget issue. I wonder when this kind of issue can be brought on the table and give a plan about when we are going to, try to handle this, and can we get a detailed budget requirement regarding which school needs how much to have the air conditioner, set up, and because this is regarding the learning environment for the students and the satisfaction rate from parents. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Juliana Hinchliffe. I'd like to take that question if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a good question. I know that the board itself has an air conditioning policy which outlines where air conditioning is going to go. And as climate change occurs, air conditioning does become more and more of a prevalent issue. For example, we have, with the resiliency funding asked from the federal government, we have asked for funding to install cooling centers in schools that don't have them. So trying to get libraries air conditioned that aren't, there's still some out there, trying to get other areas of the school air conditioned, special needs, classrooms, etc. We have to prioritize that work. I think as schools are replaced, the schools that don't have air conditioning are becoming fewer. I think some schools it's much more difficult to put in air conditioning as well. But we look at them on a case-by-case basis, and there is no plan per se, because there's so many other renewal needs that are still pressing out there for our board. But we continue to look at opportunities to provide them in a priority basis, like libraries in schools that don't have air conditioning, like special needs classrooms where air conditioning is definitely a great tool and helps that environment. And we continue to look at opportunities as budget is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to quickly point out that on our main agenda that it is timed items, and which would be notices of motion at 9:50. And I did get a message from Trustee Burgess that she would like to do that, have a notice of motion. So I think that at this point, I'm not entirely sure what needs to happen procedurally, but Trustee Hickison, I'm wondering if I temporarily put the meeting back to you for that, or can we, I'm just not sure procedurally how we accomplish that, as Trustee Burgess noted a matter of privilege and needs to leave the meeting.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could, I am here on a point of personal privilege. I have to leave the meeting, and it's sudden and it's sort of unexpected. So, I have a notice of motion. I can give it now in your committee, this committee, but it needs to be dealt with at the public board meeting. But since we're at timed items, if I could have the indulgence of my peers, I would just like to give the notice of motion, and then I'm sorry, but I do need to leave. I might be able to get back, but I really have to leave.
Certainly, yeah. Trustee Sokar, I'll just step in here. We are at timed items, so so we'll come right back to questions that we had on that agenda item that we were just on in our committee meeting. But I will, Trustee Burgess, if you want to read your notice of motion right now.
I appreciate that. Let me just try. I wasn't ready for.
I'm sorry.
Hang on. Here we go. I will send it to Madame LeBoeuf for inclusion in the February meeting. So this notice is a recommendation that administration prepare a report which outlines options for both ministry advocacy and options for a debenture to allow for additional capital funding to address shortfalls and mitigate for design deficits resulting from inflationary costs associated with the 5-year delay between the Ministry of Education's funding announcement and the tender for the K-12 build on Jasperson Lane. And I will make sure that that gets to the proper people, and I'm sorry, but I must leave the meeting.
I appreciate that, Trustee Burgess. Thank you very much, and please do take care.
Thank you.
And if you'll permit me, Madam Chair, of the subcommittee, since we're at timed items and we have done a notice of motion, I wonder if we could continue with notices of motion and then come back to your agenda, if that's all right with you.
That's fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So if anyone else has a notice of motion for this evening, that will go. Trustee Halberstadt, I see your hand up. Is that a remnant hand or a new one?
That's a new one. I have 2 notices of motion, so if you want them now, I can give them to you now.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I was going to wait till the end of the meeting, but I can do it now.
While we're doing timed items now, we might as well do it now.
Okay.
Sorry to put you on the spot here.
I'm on the clock. Yeah, the one motion is on the February the 16th. I move that the trustee members of our ad hoc bullying committee meet with administration to review the recommendations of the Hamilton-Wentworth bullying panel, in particular the creation of a student ombudsperson and a community-led independent table. And the trustees from the ad hoc committee, which are myself, Kathy Cook, and Linda, would with administration, meet with administration, and come up with review the Hamilton Wentworth study and recommendations, and identify best practices that our board may adopt. So, and on an anti-bullying platform or plan, and I can give that to Melissa.
Thank you.
Without being chopped up like that.
I appreciate that. And did you have a second notice of motion as well?
I do. Yes, again on the February the 16th, I move that the board accept an offer from the Workers' Health and Safety Center to address the board in a public session prior to administrative report to the board at the end of March. This meeting to provide information from the Workers' Health and Safety Center to provide information on the effect of Virex, Oxyvar, and other cleaning products used in our board facilities. Again, I'll give that to Ms. LaBeouf.
Thank you so much. Do I have any other trustees with notices of motion on the public agenda? Seeing none, I'll prompt everyone again just quickly, because I know we kind of stepped into this and stepped back out, so I don't want to leave anyone out if they had to kind of step away for their own bio break if they need to. But I appreciate everybody kind of putting up with that shift a little bit to the public agenda. And Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you and your the rest of your committee agenda.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to be back in at item G2. Are there any other questions for Mr. Jagroot about the service quality management system? I see Alan, your hand is up. I assume that Trustee Halberstadt, you had another question here.
Yeah, with regard to what we were discussing when we paused, with regard to Juliana's answer with regard to ventilation and air conditioning. I'm wondering if we're cognizant, I'm sure we are, of Ryan's law, which really is a provincial law where school boards have to be friendly for asthma friendly We have had, our trustees have had complaints from one person in particular whose child has been in and out of our schools and has problems with asthma. And so I'm just wondering if what we might do to alleviate that problem. And perhaps, I don't know what the consequences would be if we're not asthma friendly.
I am going to, this is Julianne Hinchliffe. I'm going to ask if Superintendent Pike would like to step in on this, as this is her portfolio.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Hinchcliffe. So yes, Ryan's Law does specifically state that our work in asthma have strategies that reduce the risk of exposure to asthma triggers in classrooms and common school areas. So typically we have a plan of care that each student who has been diagnosed with asthma is completed by the administrators at the school level, and they review what triggers that have been noted by the healthcare professional. And they work through this plan, again, with the healthcare professional and the parents or guardians, and then that is how it is implemented at the school level.
Who would this healthcare expert be? Would that be from the health unit, or?
No, that's typically their doctor.
The doctor of the actual asthma sufferer.
That's correct. It would be the student's physician that does provide information for us in order to plan accordingly for them to attend school and to engage in school activities.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions specifically on this presentation from trustees? No? Okay, so I'm going to keep going on the agenda. There were no delegations at the time of the agenda preparation. I do not believe there's anybody on the speakers list. We do not have any new business, so we are on to reports, item K. The first report is item K1, which is attachment 4, the interim financial expense report as of November 30th, 2020. Was there any sort of update from Superintendent Armstrong on this, or was this just for our information and to ask if we have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, this is intended for trustees to answer any questions. This is the usual quarterly report that we would bring forward to the board that in this case reflects our financial results to November 30th of 2020. It also provides an update to a little bit more detail in terms of the revised estimate submission that was sent to the ministry in December. There is also a new appendix in this report. It's appendix number 3, and it does provide an update on the COVID funding and any COVID expenditures that have been incurred up to November 30th as well. It would not reflect any funding that was announced by the ministry yesterday on February the 1st. As I said, the report's very detailed, but Mr. Mayhew and myself would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, great. I already have 2 questions in the queue, so I'm going to go to Trustee Higgison first and then Trustee Cheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, this is just a point for clarification, so it could be answered probably very easily. And maybe Mr. Mayhew can help me out. In our minutes from, oh goodness, December 8th, Mr. Mayhew did note, there was a question that I had, and Mr. Mayhew did note that one of the biggest costs, aside from additional teachers, is classroom technology, and there's a $3 million there's $3 million in the budget alone just for classroom technology, which isn't specifically funded. So I'm just wondering, I see in, let's say page 27, which is 6 of 12 in this report here, where we see an increase in technology devices of 3.4 million, and then it's again in Appendix 3, which Superintendent Armstrong just noted. It's approximately $3.1 million. I'm wondering if that is if those are the technology devices that Mr. Mayhew had noted in December would be upcoming because we had an RFP out, I believe. And is that satisfied by this expenditure that we see reflected in Appendix 3?
It's Sean here. I can try to answer that question. There's if you look at the 3.4 that you're referring to in page 27, what that is that's the technology student devices, also shown in Appendix 3, the 3.1 plus the extra wireless LTE devices. That's the extra additional cost apart from what we typically budget for devices. So this is really the device cost that is driven as a result of COVID-19. And yes, you are correct that those are all the additional purchases that were made in the fall. And those invoices still continue to come in. You can see that our actual Q1 expenses for those devices are just over, I guess, $2.3 million for the student devices and over $200,000 for the wireless LTE devices. So that budget's pretty much been almost used up already to equip students for the alternative learning model.
Thank you.
Is there supplemental?
Just to follow up from that, there and so that 3.4 million was that taken out of the either 1% or 2% that we allocated from our reserves?
That would be correct.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Trustee Chin now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the transportation budget and funding. And on page 29, and there is the last paragraph, an increase of 1.3 million is budgeted for changes in secondary school bell times. I wonder if you can explain more regarding this. And also, next sentence, this increase is offset by $1 in savings as busing is not required for students learning remotely at home. I wonder if this number is correct, or can you give an explanation regarding how much the saving would be for the students with remote learning? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can answer that. I can clarify that the $1 you're seeing, it should say 1.0 million after that. So that was an admission from the report. The $1.3 million is the incremental cost for changes in the bell times, accommodating the secondary schedule, the new model for transportation because of the alternating days. Sorry, I misspoke there. Shelley, you might want to clarify that. There's savings because of students. The $1 million of savings is a result of savings from students not riding the buses because they've chosen the virtual model, or they're in an alternating day. They're not going to school full time.
Yeah, I can try and elaborate a little bit on that too. So the $1.3 million, when we changed the secondary bell times to accommodate the in-person learning schedule, we're still obligated based on the contract that we have with through the Transportation Consortium to pay the drivers from the time that the secondary bell picks up students at the end of their day to when they go back out and do another run to pick up elementary students at the end of their day. And the longer that stretch of time is between the end of the secondary run and picking up the elementary run, it costs the board more money. And so that's what that $1.3 million is for, is because we changed the bell times to accommodate the new learning model. And the savings, that is correct. What Mr. Mayhew said was that we have fewer students that are still riding the buses, so there was an offsetting cost savings that we realized as a result of that.
Thank you. Was there a follow-up, Trustee Chin?
Yes. This savings is for the bus, not for the school bus, right? It does not relate to the school bus of primary school, right? Elementary school.
The savings would be for all student transportation, elementary and secondary, based on the ridership.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from trustees? I'm not seeing any hands or any comments in the chat at this time. No? Okay, I do have a couple of questions, if you'll indulge me for 1 minute. I had a couple questions about teachers, and I wanted to just ask a couple of questions on page 28. So it's noted that the revised budget reflects an increase of 47 teachers, so 32 elementary and 15 secondary, to ensure class size requirements are maintained while accommodating the alternative learning models. And it says the financial impact is an increase to teacher salaries and benefits of 4.8 million. So I turned here because I noticed that our enrollment is down, and but despite that, we have still increased the number of teachers. I was just wondering if administration could comment on that for a minute, just make sure that we're understanding it correctly, and what's the goal behind that, I guess.
It's Director Kelly. I wonder if Chris Mills could respond to that. I think that's a accommodation issue around different learning models.
Yeah, that would be correct. What we had to do is make sure that our class sizes stayed low. We had the health and safety concerns, and we wanted to ensure our class sizes were lower, and that's why we had the increase in the number of teachers that were hired during that time.
And as a follow-up, as it relates to the budget, thank you for that. Is that additional funding for teachers coming out of the 2% that trustees approved, or was there separate ministry funding at all for that?
This is Superintendent Armstrong. There was some additional staffing funding that was provided by the ministry to accommodate permanent teaching hires, as well as the hiring of vocational teachers on a contract in order to support that.
One more supplemental there. Do we know how much ministry funding versus how much it's our board putting in? Do we have any accuracy? Was that part of the revised estimate at all?
Yeah, sorry, hang on a second. I'm just trying to trying to flip through all my pages here. We received almost $1.2 million for the temporary hiring of non-permanent teaching staff. There was also funding for additional teaching staff of another $709,000. So certainly that will definitely assist to offset some of that cost. But I don't know that it will necessarily offset the totality of the cost.
Okay, thank you. And I see Trustee Halberstadt's hand. Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, with regard to those 47 FTE teachers, so I'm still not quite clear. Are those now permanent positions? They're permanent hires going forward, no matter what might happen with regard to the pandemic and the need for more teachers.
As Director Kelly, I wonder if Superintendent Houston can answer that.
Yes, so that would be separated out between elementary and secondary, and once they're hired to contract, they are contract, but also acknowledge that, we do have retirements that come, and then through attrition, it's not necessarily that there's going to be 47 extra teachers in the system, because as I've mentioned previously, we do have more retirements this year than what we've anticipated too. So we won't really know until June if there's additional teachers, but there is provisions within both collective agreements around what happens to teachers that are hired to contract in the event that there aren't contract positions available for them. Then they do move into long-term occasional teaching positions.
Thank you.
Any further questions from trustees? I did have one more. And I'll just ask about Appendix 3 on page 38. I noted that at the bottom there, it basically says that total COVID-19 funding is around 19.5 million. Approximately 7.5 of that is from the additional 2%, and then the rest of it is from the ministry. But then I noticed on, if you go back to just the explanation of Appendix 3, I believe that's on page, I can find it now, page 33. It says that we haven't essentially spent it all, that all the COVID-19 related expenses haven't been incurred at this point. I'm just curious, do we think that 19 million essentially that is both ministry funded and from our own surplus, are we on track to spending that all, to being over, to being under? And I'm just wondering if there's any sort of projections with respect to the COVID-19 funding specifically.
This is Superintendent Armstrong. I'll start that question, and certainly if Mr. Mayhew or if Director Kelly has something further to add, I would welcome that. Right now, we don't, when we took you through the presentation, the trustees through the presentation on, I think it was back in December, or was it November? Anyway, about the COVID expenditures, we did highlight that there were a number of areas, or there were some areas where there was risk. Absenteeism obviously being one, the state of the pandemic being another one, and we saw that recently when we had the Section 22 order issued, and boards were told to close their schools for in-person learning. And so there were instances in that case where we actually realized savings, for example, because utility costs were a little bit lower. So it's dependent, right, on a lot of factors, including how the pandemic plays out. That being said, the ministry did announce some additional measures, funding measures for school boards. I believe it was on Monday. And as part of that announcement, the board's going to be receiving some additional funding for certain targeted items like technology, ventilation systems, health and safety, and student transportation, which certainly will go forward to helping fund those the costs related to the pandemic. At this time, we're not aware of anything that would suggest that we would go over. And as we had explained in our previous meetings about and discussions about the COVID funding and expenditures, when we asked for approval for the additional 1%, that would really only be if it was absolutely necessary to utilize that. And certainly it's our objective and intent not to have to go there if we don't have to. And clearly the additional funding that we will be receiving that was announced earlier in the week will be helpful towards that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Helps to put things into perspective about where we're at and what kind of funding we have available. And it sounds like your team is doing a great job at trying to plan as much as possible with such uncertainty. And even, you're right, being out of school for over almost 2 months now was not foreseen at the time in November when we had the last presentation. So thank you for the report. I don't think there are any further questions from any trustees. So I'm going to keep moving on in the agenda. We are on item K2 now, which is tender and request for proposal awarded for quarter ended November 30th, 2020. Are there any questions about this report from trustees? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to just keep going as we are at 10:21, so I won't belabor it. Item K3, which is the Ontario School Board's Insurance Exchange Premium Renewal 2021. This is on page 42 to 46. Are there any questions from trustees? None. Okay. Superintendent Armstrong, did you have any? Oh, sorry. Trustee Higginson, I just saw your hand. Yes, go ahead.
I apologize. Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of got like switched around here. It's my fault. And this is on on our OSB premium renewals. I noticed on 3 of 4 of this report, so it's page 44 in our agenda, that there is a summary of past board actions and decisions which are proactive regarding reducing risk, and many of those have policy implications. So things that we have implemented in policies, which then have led further down to administrative procedures, which may have reduced some of the risk. And so I'm wondering if there, just from a governance perspective, if there are any further policy updates that we could engage in or that we could take a look at, which may further reduce risk. Is there anything that is kind of top of mind or that you've noticed that have come up in your own analyses of risk where adjustments to policy may help reduce our risk?
I will direct this towards administration. Yes, Superintendent Armstrong.
Yeah, I was having a problem hitting the unmute button there. I apologize for that. There's a number of policies and regulations that we are in the process of currently reviewing. One of them including risk management with respect to high risk activities. That's one that is on our radar to take a look at, and certainly we will be doing that in light of where we've seen our insurance premiums have landed for 2021. And so certainly that will be a consideration as we work to update this policy this year.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, just with regard to that report, we had a bad year, it appears. That's what the report says. But the graph or the chart on page 42 looks at our costs, percentage costs compared to all boards, and it really looks like it's one-sided. Like liability 9% for all boards, 32.40% for us, property 5.2 for all boards, 13.27. and on and on, and liability, and automobile 3.0% to 9.25. I guess, is there any good explanation why it's so lopsided? Generally, we've done pretty well.
Through you, Madam Chair, this is Superintendent Armstrong. Thank you for the question. Yes, absolutely. It's not an encouraging trend to see. With respect to, in particular, the liability and the automotive, the 9% obviously would be an average of what is representative of all the boards that are in the insurance exchange. With respect to our board, unfortunately, it's our claims experience. And we've had a lot more claims that have been submitted in the past year, and unfortunately what it's done is it has impacted our rates relative to what other boards have been claims that other boards have made. So truly it's a function of that, and we certainly keep working to to do better with that.
Okay, just a supplementary. I guess you can't really blame the insurer, OBSB, for this situation. Sounds like you're still pretty fixed on the service they provide, and you note at the end of the report that their contract goes through the end of 2021. would there be an opportunity at that time to go out for bids to see that they're competitive or still competitive?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just to try and clarify a little bit too with my last response, certainly, like I've indicated, claims experience is the primary factor for why the premiums have gone up. Sometimes it can only just take one claim, one really big claim, depending on the nature of the claim, that could have an influence on that. So I just, that's part of it is the size of the claim and the number of the claims. You're correct. We have an agreement right now with OSB. It's a 5-year agreement that takes us through to 2021. We certainly could investigate other options with respect to insurance. I think there will be some challenges because OSB does represent 78 school boards across the province and other school authorities. And so certainly there is an advantage to being part of an insurance exchange program that represents school boards. And I think, it may be challenging in some respects because to try and get a competitive quote based on the number of potential incidences that could happen in a school board. And there is a limit in terms of the liability amount that the board would pay out through the OSB insurance program relative to what you would get from an ordinary insurance broker themselves.
Okay, so what I'm reading there is I don't see an administrative recommendation to go out for competitive bids. Is that a correct assumption?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, not necessarily. I think, we did the last time back in 2016, when the OSB renewal came up, there was a recommendation and a report that went forward to the board. And I think we would do the same thing. It would be prudent for us to do so. I'm just, in my response, I was just trying to elaborate. There are advantages to being in participating in the insurance exchange program. And there might be challenges in trying to get a competitive bid from another insurer. But certainly we will be bringing a recommendation forward to the Board of Trustees in the spring.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Superintendent Armstrong. Are there any further questions on the OSB premium renewal report? Okay, seeing none. On to item K4, Windsor-Essex Student Transportation Services Annual Report, Attachment 7. Are there any questions from trustees on this report? Going once, going twice. I'm not seeing any comments in the chat, so we're going to move on. Item L, trustee question period. Are there any questions from trustees for administration? Nope. Okay. I did have one question, and I recognize Superintendent Armstrong. I didn't give you the heads up about this, but it was about the funding announcement from yesterday, and I did wonder if there were any details that you could share tonight as you were speaking tonight, and I remembered it. And I was just wondering if you had anything, or if that will be at a further board update.
Thank you. I'd be happy. There was some board by board allocations that were announced to us with respect to that funding. I think it's important to note that when the ministry gave the notification about the $381 million investment, not necessarily all that funding flows to school boards, right? It's being directed to other places as well. But in terms of what we have been allocated for technological devices, we've been allocated an additional, we've been allocated $1.4 million, which is good news. For air quality and ventilation, we've been allocated an $846,000. For those two items, we do need to procure, however, through the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. The ministry was very clear that was how that procurement was supposed to work. And I think probably the reasoning for that is because there are also 72 other school boards that are going to be getting funding, and there's going to be a demand in the market for that. For health and safety, that includes PPE. We've been allocated $1.2 million. I'm rounding to the nearest number there for you. And for student transportation, we were allocated another $67,000. So the total we've been allocated is just under $3.5 million. Also, the ministry did announce some additional financial flexibility to boards to use up to 15% of proceeds of disposition. So that's funding that you get when you sell surplus properties. That can only be used to fund health and safety cost pressures related to keeping your schools open. And that's when you already have it in your deficit of at least 1%. But I don't know that that's necessarily anything that we would want to take advantage of. But we're certainly trying to manage that within the funding that we have right now.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. Are there any further questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none, any notices of motion? Any announcements for this committee? Okay, so this meeting is adjourned and we will reconvene back in the public board session. So I'll hand it over to trustee, or I guess Chairperson Higgison.
Get to like wear different hats. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Trustee Sipkar, and thank you very much to trustees and to all of our presenters tonight and those who hung out for a long time for us to get through that. I appreciate that. So we are back on our blue public session agenda for anyone still following along, and we are at letter E, declarations of conflict of interest for in here. Do I hear any declarations of conflict of interest for in here? Actions of the board meeting private session. I do not believe we had any. Am I correct, Trustee Cook? We had no actions of the board meeting private session.
You're correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So I'm looking at G, approval of the minutes. Looking for a mover. Thank you very much, Trustee Hatfield. Approval of those minutes. Do I have a seconder to approve those minutes for November 11th? Or yes, November 3rd. Seconded by Trustee Sipkar. I appreciate that. Any discussion on approval of the minutes? Seeing none. I'm looking for any opposition to approving those minutes. Anyone opposed? Wonderful, that carries. Any business arising from those minutes? They are pretty short. No business arising from those minutes. Wonderful. So we're on to letter I, recommendations from the standing committees. I look to the two chairs, but I don't think there were any recommendations from those standing committees this evening. Wonderful. Notices of motion. We did have 3 notices of motion already given at timed items. Thank you, Trustee Sipkar, for keeping us on track there. Do I have anyone else, since I kind of surprised everybody with getting their paperwork together there? I just want to give one last opportunity if anyone has any notices of motions this evening. Seeing and hearing none, just want to remind anyone who has already given a notice of motion to send that to Madame Leboeuf in writing this evening. We've already got a mover for adjournment. Trustee Cook, do I have a seconder to adjourn the meeting this evening? Seconded. Anyone opposed to that? Tremendous. Thank you all so much, and thank you to our technical team for getting us back up and running tonight on our live stream. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.